Morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be joining us from. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Robb. I'm the CEO and founder of MPW. Delighted to be your host for the next 2.5 hours on this second World Athletics webinar of the year, Harnessing the Storm, Embracing Global Trends and Insights to Chart Our Future. As always, please say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. We have nearly 450 people registered already. When I last looked about half an hour ago, from 73 countries. So an amazing sign up for this time. We have 15 speakers literally spanning the world. We have Sam Lee, who's wide awake in Auckland, New Zealand at midnight and going all the way across to the western side of the world. We have Christine Bone joining us from Colorado and then everywhere in between. So a packed program, 450 nearly from 73 countries. We are streaming live on the MPW Facebook page. We typically would be streaming live into China, but unfortunately Juliet Tui and her team have another event on tonight and they're not able to live stream us, but they will be posting the recording in due course. Decks will be available after. We have a number of presentations tonight. And an important date for your diary, the next World Athletics webinar will be on the 3rd of July. So let's jump into the program. As soon as I finish the intro, we will jump into our first segment, which we're hoping that we may need to switch this up because one of the speakers is struggling to join us. The WFGSI and McKinsey Sporting Goods Report 2025, the New Balancing Act, turning uncertainty into opportunity. We will then have a quick segment on the ASICS Global Running Conference taking place in San Diego. And then we will move on to a segment, Who is investing in the running industry and why? That will then be followed with a wonderful case study. We Move the Kids, a case study on UBS Athletics Kids Cup coming from India. And then something which I think many of you would have seen already, but a personal insight for those joining, the Brand Finance Global Marathon's Top 50 report, which was launched on the Thursday before the London Marathon in London. And then we move on to our final big segment, which is how to evolve the business model and what is the impact of the current global environment. That's a panel that I'll be hosting. And of course, I'll be introducing each of the individual speakers as we come up to each segment. And then we'll be welcoming Alessio Punzi, who needs no introduction, the head of running and mass participation from World Athletics, to give us his closing remarks. And then we'll wrap it up within 2.5 hours. Really looking forward to the segment. And let me just pause for a moment just to check in. Emma, do we have Alex with us or will we ask Christine Bowen to go first? Emma, are you on there?
Not yet, Chris. It would be great if Christine could go first and then I'll be ready.
All right, wonderful. Christine, if we could invite you to join us on screen, please. Christine Bowen, Director of Strategic Events at Race Roster. You should have sharing rights. Over to you, Christine, to give the update on the ASICS Global Running Conference.
Thanks for the opportunity to chat here this morning, Chris. We are super excited to announce that we are full steam ahead with the second year of the ASICS in partnership with World Athletics Business of Running Events Conference. We held our first one last year in Colorado Springs, and it was incredibly successful. You can flip to the next slide. This conference is different from the standpoint that it's very specifically focused on the leaders and leadership in the running industry, and with a focus on leaders coming together and taking their learnings back to their teams, and also a heavy nod to revenue generation, looking for different revenue streams in the space. We know that people need to really diversify right now in what they're doing with their events, and this is where you will come to find that out. We've included a couple of quotes here of what folks have said about attending the event in the past, and already numbers are growing quickly for attendance for this year. You can flip to the next slide. So we will be, I'm excited to say we'll be in San Diego, July 13th through 15th. Lots of perks available for attendees. All attendees will receive a pair of ASICS running shoes, ASICS backpacks, some incredible hospitality, off-site events. And the bonus news for this is that if you're a World Athletics event, you are eligible for a discount, and depending on the level of event that you are at. You can click this or scan the QR code, and it'll take you to the website, and you'll start to see our speakers being rolled out, and our agenda being populated throughout this week. It should be pretty locked in. So it gives you a couple months to plan and join us in San Diego in July. And if you go to the website, you'll see my email, and you can come in and ask any questions. If you do need a visa letter to attend, we can handle that for you as well. But we would love to invite the community from around the world. This is a global event. We did have people from multiple countries attend last year, and we'd like to encourage that again. So we're excited about this partnership once again with World Athletics, and we look forward to hosting you all in San Diego, whoever can join us.
Let me cut in here very briefly, Chris. Alessio from World Athletics here, for those who don't know me. The discount codes can be redeemed via codes that World Athletics will send to labor road races, essentially starting from tonight. So there will be a panel to sign up for the conference, but with the codes that World Athletics will give you, labor races get $100 off, elite gold and platinum label races $200 off. Thank you. Back to studio.
Thank you, Alessio. Emma, with Alex is on screen there. Alex, you've joined us. Wonderful. There's Alex. So
I'm sorry, I was locked out of the building. We had a fire alarm here that was very untimely. I do apologize.
No problem whatsoever. Glad to see you. We see that you're named as Emma Mason on the screen at the moment. We will adjust that. You've obviously had to use her link to get in, but it's very clear who the Emma Mason is and who the Alex is. So let me do the formal introduction to this segment. Delighted to welcome you back for the second year. Emma Mason-Zwiebler, who's the CEO of WFSGI. And Alexander Thiel, and we'll rename you. You've been renamed already on the screen. Partner and leader, global sporting goods practice at McKinsey & Company. And delighted to have you with us to present the findings of the WSFGI, World Federation of Sporting Goods Industry, and McKinsey Sporting Goods Report 2025, the new balancing act, turning uncertainty into opportunity. Over to you, Alex and Emma.
Alexander Thiel from McKinsey. I lead our global sporting goods practice. In that practice, we work predominantly with brands, with retailers, with manufacturers, but also leagues, clubs, and associations. And we try to have our finger really also on the pulse of the consumer to always have a view of what the latest trends in the sector are. And together with WFSGI as a wonderful partner indeed over the last few years, we do an annual report where we try to not just play back what the previous year has brought, but predominantly also try to say what we think is important in the year going forward and what we see as the main emerging trends that should be on everybody's priority list.
Thanks, Alex. And hello also from my side. As Chris mentioned, my name is Emma Zwiebler. I'm the CEO at WFSGI. And we are the Global Trade Association for Sporting Goods Companies. So we represent roughly about 70% of the global industry by annual turnover across the full range of brands, manufacturers, and retailers. We've partnered with McKinsey & Company on this State of the Sporting Goods Industry report since 2020, so since early pandemic times. And we obviously also have a long term partnership with World Athletics and of many of the international sports federations and international sporting events. So really looking forward to this opportunity to talk with you today. And I think, Alex, maybe we just skip over this because we're running a little bit late. This is a summary of the previous reports. As Chris mentioned, we'll share this presentation with you afterwards, and all of these are free and available to download. So maybe, Alex, over to you to give a bit of an overview of what we highlighted as the key themes for Sporting Goods Report 2025.
And I will be brief, right? As said, the report is titled "A New Balancing Act, Turning Uncertainty into Opportunity." And what do we mean with this balancing act? That's also a bit into the point number one. It's about that on the one hand, there is the need to go for growth, to realize growth, which has become much more difficult than it still was a few years ago. And I'll talk about how and why. But at the same time, it's also about having a look at profitability and productivity. So a bit of a dual agenda. Where do we see the opportunity, right? We still see the sports market as one that offers very solid growth, driven just by the megatrends, right, of hundreds of millions, actually billions of people seeking to live, right, a healthy and active life and lifestyle, and those numbers increasing. At the same time, the difficulties that we have in the global, right, economic, political, general macro landscape make the task not easier. And there's also not that one clear wave anymore that you can ride into happiness, right? A few years ago, coming out of Corona, it was clearly outdoor, and if you were right in the outdoor category, you were growing above market for sure. Many years before, while it were the large emerging markets, China and India, if you were strong there, you were riding that wave. That clear wave does not exist. That's what we mean in one when we say, right, growth has become more elusive. It still is there. It's driven by very stable megatrends, but it is more fragmented, more granular, thereby more difficult to find. However, and that's the second point, and Emma will talk about it later, we do think that there's one large and still to a large point also untapped market opportunity, and that is the fact that almost a third of global adults are not physically active. So that's the equivalent of almost 2 billion people. So 2 times India, if you want, a market that is completely untapped. And if one would present a huge win-win-win. Win for the individuals who would live with a healthier lifestyle, win for the countries who are not carrying the big economic and social burden of an inactive and unhealthy population, and win for the companies, right, who are able to do business with those. So that, in our view, could be that next wave. However, it's also, as we'll see, a market that is difficult to unlock because there's a reason that people are inactive in these groups. Sometimes they face also structural barriers, economic barriers that need to be overcome. At the other end of the spectrum, and that's point number 3, we have those almost super active users for whom active lifestyle really is now the primary identity. That is a trend that has been steadily growing from 10 years ago when we started talking about sport as a lifestyle, at leisure as a trend. Now we have, as I said, a group of super users, a sizable group that for whom sport and active lifestyle in general is the primary identity marker. And these are, of course, the people most valuable for brands and retailers as ambassadors with a huge halo into their immediate or broader sphere. Something we also talk about under point number 4 is when we look at the general sporting goods market, it's a story where the large incumbents, the really large incumbents that operate across many, many different categories and sports are increasingly under pressure and losing market share to those smaller or at least medium-sized challengers that are much more focused on 1 or 2 specific categories. And then in these have a lot more believability, authenticity, a lot more brand strength, a lot more focus, a lot more authenticity that today, is a very important currency. And that's honestly a trend we think will continue. We think to succeed today as a brand, you need to be very authentic. You need to be very strong in a clear core. You can expand from that, but most likely not too far. And the last point, honestly, is maybe one a bit more for the watch list, less of immediate actions than in the others, but nevertheless, we wanted to bring it into focus. And that is that there is a huge demand for live experiences and thereby also live sport experiences, whether they are personally lived by joining a Pilates class around the corner or by going to large events, sporting goods events. Both of these are absolutely booming, and it shows that we are fully out, let's say, of the Corona world. We are in an environment where people seek community and life experiences and prioritize those, and thereby create a potential stage for brands and others to present themselves. These are the main priorities we look at this year. And let me just, before we go deeper into them, also highlight what I already said before. Underlying this is what we still think is a very solid market with a little bit of softer growth. Why is the growth a little bit softer? Well, I think you can all think of the reasons. There's so much uncertainty, right? We had to factor it in. But the good thing about sports is that we see the mega trends driving the growth, the individual drive, right, to live more active, more healthy lives is very much alive. And the more people join the global middle class, the broader this desire becomes. So let's now go into these first 5 points very quickly with a bit of a spotlight. And let's start with the first one, if you go to the next page, which is around, as I said, executive having to have this dual agenda on the one hand, looking at revenue, but also productivity, while also being aware of all the other factors that matter. Indeed, as I said, according to our latest research, it's not either growth or productivity. It really is both. You need to today have both as a priority, which is not necessarily easy. And you need to adapt to the external factors that are often challenging. Consumers have become significantly more cautious, prioritizing non-discretionary items, shifting to lower price and lower price retailers, decreasing general in their loyalty to brand. That offers opportunity, but also challenging, and the need to be much more flexible in pricing, to have to adapt retail strategies, to really invest into consumer loyalty. And of course, there's a lot of geopolitical uncertainty that will likely continue to even increase. And that is something, there's no silver bullet, but what we, for example, do with a lot of our clients is we develop scenarios. What could happen? And if it happens, how would you react to that? And these kind of scenarios you need to have ready. You need to think through what different things are that could happen, how you would be prepared. So with that, Emma, do you want to take us into better news, the large untapped market of the physically inactive?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Thanks for the overview. And as Alex said, as we moved from something around, let's say, overall growth of the sporting goods industry, which is something that Alex and I are talking about regularly, we're moving into a topic that is much broader. It's much bigger than any one of our single companies, and it's much bigger than our industry, and it's bigger than collectively sport as a sector. So in chapter 2, we take a deep dive into what Alex described as the physical inactivity crisis. And for those of you that have heard from WFSGI previously or read some of our reports recently, this is us really returning to a familiar theme, because rising physical inactivity is something that is affecting our brands, our industry's growth on a global and a local basis. And it also has a potential to drastically impact on sports participation as well as global public health. Historically, or in the past few years, we've collectively reported on this as a huge risk. But this year, as Alex said, we wanted to turn the problem a little bit on its head and start to look at it from an opportunistic perspective. What would it mean if we could transform the lives of this 1.8 billion inactive adults to being active participants, active consumers, and active employees? So I'll take a few moments to just go through the detail of where we are on global physical inactivity, and then we'll talk a little bit about what the sporting goods industry is doing to try and take advantage of that opportunity and obviously improve public health, and also share with you, the fact that we believe this is a journey that we have to go on as a sports sector collectively. It's something that the sporting goods industry cannot resolve on its own, and we need other stakeholders from the running community, from the mass participation industry, to come with us on this journey if we have a chance of really turning risk into opportunity. So where are we on physical inactivity? Well, as a short fact, it continues to rise, and it's not a temporary setback or something that we can easily associate with a spike in inactivity associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. the latest data published by the World Health Organization back in 2024. And the reason we use those data sets is that the WHO holds the only globally comparable data set on inactivity levels, both at youth, adult, and older adult level. And the latest data they published last year, as Alex mentioned earlier, is that 31% of adults globally are considered inactive. That's up 5 percentage points since 2010. And if we don't make any changes in the way we engage with this inactive community, it's projected to rise to 35% by 2030, so in only 5 years. And unfortunately, when we look at youth, that next generation, that critical next generation for sport participation and for sporting goods consumption, the stats get even worse. 81% of the next generation do not move their bodies enough to maintain good health. And of course, they are our next generation participants, consumers, fans, and employees. So if that's the basic data set, what does it mean? Why do we continue to talk about it to the sporting goods industry, and why do we think it's a relevant topic for you today? Well, the World Health Organization has already calculated the cost if nothing changes. And if nothing changes by 2030, 500 million additional people will fall into ill health. They will become sick directly as a result of failing to move their bodies enough. And the treatment of those additional people are at a conservative cost around $300 billion US. Now, from a sporting goods industry standpoint, more sick people means less people moving, less people buying our products, a less productive workforce, and of course, less money in the overall global economy to resolve the issue. From your standpoint, from sports standpoint, from event standpoint, it also means less people who are likely to sign up to any kind of physical activity or sport, let alone mass participation events where you're looking at certain longer distances, 10K, 20K, 40K endurance. So that's why we have always pushed the message that we are not just talking about a health crisis when we look at this data. Very clearly, this is a health crisis. But we are also looking, in our view, at a potential business crisis and a sport participation crisis if we don't take steps now to change our approach. So that was the message that we pushed out in previous years. But as we've said, we wanted this year to look at much more positive perspective. So how could we turn what is a huge risk factor in our mind to long-term sustainable growth into an opportunity that's presented by this huge 1.8 billion inactive market? As Alex mentioned, that's bigger than China, that's bigger than India. And we believe it's a huge opportunity for our industry as well as it is for wider sport participation and sport events. So what are we actually trying to do about it from a sporting goods industry perspective? I've said we've been talking about it for a number of years. Well, in the report, we highlight a number of ways in which we believe sporting goods companies have to move if we are to really turn risk into opportunity. And the good news from our perspective is that we're not starting from ground zero. There's a lot of companies within the sporting goods industry who are already doing things in this space, but we need more companies to do more often if we are to really change risk into opportunity. Alex mentioned earlier that there are some challenges to really going from risk to opportunity, and he highlighted a number of the barriers to participation, why people might not be moving their bodies sufficiently at this stage. And what that basically boils down to is that this group of consumers, this inactive community, you cannot approach them like you would approach entering any new market opportunity because they're not the same. They don't have the same behaviors and they don't have that immediate positive association to sport, physical activity, driving health and well-being outcomes for them. So obviously, this report was designed largely with sporting goods executives in mind. And so in the report, we highlight 3 ways in which we would encourage sporting goods companies to move forwards. And the first is looking at product innovation designed specifically to remove barriers to participation. So products that can help overcome reasons why consumers might not be active. And some of the examples we highlight in the report are around Adidas Stay and Play range, which supports women to be active throughout their life cycle, and Nike's Modest Wear line that allows people to be active while respecting cultural and religious practices. We also look at recommendations around campaigns and that help specifically change perceptions of what it means for people to be physically active. And here we're looking at one of the industry's critical strong points. If product innovation is at one strength, market reach and engagement with the consumer is another. So we look at encouraging companies to use marketing campaigns to promote physical activity and sport for all, highlighting real people, using real people, real life examples to try to transform the perception of sport and physical activity for people who might have never thought that movement, sport, or physical activity was for them. And in those, some of the best in class examples that we highlight in the report, we look at New Balance's Run Your Way campaign, specifically focusing on runners of every shape, size, and origin, and on ASIC's Desk Break campaign. For those of you that follow the popular TV show Succession, the Desk Break campaign featured Logan Roy, the show's protagonist, highlighting that he's not the thing to fear in the office, but lack of movement and inactivity is. So really trying to challenge and use popular culture as a way to transform perceptions for that community, that inactive community, of what it means to move your body. And then finally, enhancing youth engagement. I highlighted the really shocking statistics around the next generation, that 81% who don't move their bodies enough to maintain good health and are therefore starting life at a disadvantage from a health perspective, but also starting life from our perspective, much less likely to engage in sport and physical activity. And there we think we need a real focus on youth and community engagement. Many of you will have followed the trends around digital lifestyles that's obviously impacted the way we work, play, and study. And we need programs and initiatives that help children to engage in sport and physical activity, even in that digital world, so that help kids to re-engage and participate in sport and make sure that we continue to have that next generation coming through as participants and consumers. And of course, we recognize in the report that we need our industry to do more. We need more companies within the sporting goods industry to show up and to invest in examples of product innovation campaigns or programs like the ones we've listed in the report. But critically, we also need other stakeholders to play their part. And that was one of the reasons why we were really excited about this opportunity that was presented today, because running is one of the most accessible sports in the world, and the World Health Organization has already cited mass participation events as one of the key tools that countries and other stakeholders can use to create active societies and improve the health of citizens. So you're already on a great starting block, and we do believe that running and mass participation events are an incredibly powerful tool to help improve the lives of those 1.8 billion inactive people, and of course help boost growth in your sport, your activity, and your business along the way. So that was chapter 2, where we take a deep dive, and there's more detail in the report, but we take a deep dive into the physical inactivity crisis. Chapter 3 looks at something completely different, but which you may have picked up on from various reports that have been published since the pandemic. And that is, of course, that many people are citing an increased and growing awareness in the importance of sport, physical activity, health, and well-being, and that consumers are starting to prioritize it. So before I go into a little bit of the detail of this, it's probably worth saying, how do we reconcile that? Because I've just told you about a global physical inactivity crisis, and now I'm telling you that for many consumers, physical activity has become a core part of their identities. And here it's really important to remember that when we talk about the physically inactive, we are talking about the people who do not meet the recommended minimum level of movement per week to maintain good health. It's a pretty low bar. So for adults, it's 5 times 30 minutes, 150 minutes a week of moderate exercise. Walking can count. And for adolescents, it's 60 minutes per day. So we're really talking about low barriers here. When we are talking about active consumers, we are talking about people who already meet that threshold. They're well above it. And what we have observed, especially since we started working together with the McKinsey team, is that there's a growing gap between those who are inactive, those in the last chapter, and those who are physically active consumers, already active. That gap is becoming much, much wider. And what we see, and that's why we can reconcile ourselves to the other reports that have and messages around this growing trend in health and well-being is that physical activity is becoming a core part of their identities. And there's a growing number of consumers. We have here in the report, it's 1 in 4 who are exercising 6 or 7 times a week. And it's more than just frequency. It's fitness, well-being, sport, physical activity. They're not just becoming embedded in these people's lifestyles, they're also becoming a core part of their identity. And you see here on screen that a significant number of the global population and almost over half of Gen Zers are viewing fitness as their core identity. Now, this is generally great news for your industry, for sport, for participation, and of course for our industry, because these are consumers who are already active and engaged, who we know how to talk to, who we know how to engage. And what we now have the opportunity to do collectively is to support them on their journey to embed physical activity and sport as a full part of their life cycle. So how do we suggest that people can, take advantage of this opportunity and to support these consumers to be physically active throughout their lives? We think there's probably 3 opportunities. And here again, we're looking at this from a sporting goods industry perspective to make sure that we are developing products and marketing that meet the emotional and functional needs of the active consumer. So making sure that we're emphasizing both how they're being supported from a technical product perspective, but also how we're helping them to fulfill those ambitions they have to embed physical activity within their lifestyles from start to finish. We also need, from an industry perspective, to make sure that the connections we are making with consumers align our brand values with their active lifestyle. So that will obviously help build loyalty in the communities, those communities throughout their lifespan. And of course, looking at how do we leverage those super active consumers as ambassadors. Alex mentioned this at the start, but how do we engage with them? They're not necessarily elite athletes, but they're those people that have really chosen to put sport, physical activity, and health at the forefront of who they are as individuals, and encouraging them, obviously, to promote those lifestyles and what it means to be a physically active person. Just before I hand back to Alex to take you through the final 2 chapters of the report, it's probably just worth saying, I've obviously talked here about 2 completely different communities that are both interesting growth opportunities for our industry, but also sport participation as a whole. We believe you cannot achieve sustainable growth of the sporting goods industry or the sports industry by focusing on the active community alone, because that inactive community continues to grow, because that gap widens between the inactive and the active consumers. So both communities need to be seen alongside. The challenges, of course, as we've just highlighted here, they require completely different approaches from a business perspective. So I think it's a really interesting opportunity both for our industry, but for more generally sports, to understand how do we make sure that we embrace those who have already taken on the active lifestyle, and how do we bring with us in a much more integrated and inclusive way than we perhaps have previously, those people that are now classified as inactive. Thanks very much. Alex, I hand back to you.
Yeah, let's talk about challenger brands and a bit what they can teach us about the future of competition in the sporting goods market. And let's take a moment to think about how much the world of competition in sporting goods has really changed in just the past few years, because I think the playing field hasn't just tilted, it really has been redrawn. So from 2019 to 2024, we really saw smaller, agile challenger brands capturing 3 full percentage points of market share, right, from the large industry incumbents or giants. That might sound small, but in the global markets, it's actually a seismic shift, and it's a completely shift of trend. So what's happening? Well, I think the old rules of dominance, scale, legacy, brand awareness, they aren't enough anymore. The new game is really being won by brands that are faster, sharper, and closer to their consumers. So challenger brands are thriving because they know exactly who they are for, I would say. They craft razor-sharp value propositions, really tailored to specific consumer segments. They don't try to be everything to everyone. They focus and they win. And they also embrace innovation that's not just technical, but it's really visible. Because who has done the most, right, real innovation over the last few years? Probably Nike. But who has done the most visible innovations? Probably another brands. So it's not enough to have a high performance product. It has to look and feel in the right way. It has to spark curiosity, create conversation. And that's why I think the smaller challenger brands are often masters of a more cultural form of marketing. They know how to speak the language of their communities. They show up in ways that feel authentic, sometimes even a bit tribal in a positive way. And they don't just sell products, they build belonging. But there's also more behind this rise. Distribution channels have opened up. Strategic wholesale partnership, once the strongholds of the large incumbents, are now available to smaller brands because the large incumbents have largely left them vacant and moved towards direct to consumer. So also today, a network of really world-class third-party manufacturers enables even smaller players to deliver big brand quality in many areas. So in the end, what is this all about, right? This is about a fragmentation of market, a fragmentation of consumption towards brands that in their specific niche, right, are significantly more successful. And we think that is a trend we will see to continue. So in a way, you could say, right, the future belongs not to the biggest in our view, but maybe more to the boldest. I would say let's jump over the next slide and go straight into our fifth topic, exactly. So let's talk about something that, as I said before, is really making a significant comeback. Something that actually many predicted would fade in an increasingly digital and post-corona world, live in-person experiences. So after years of digital acceleration, we are now witnessing a really strong shift. People are returning to the stands, the stadiums, but also the studios, and they are doing so in absolute record numbers. Right? In 2023, global ticketing market for live events surpassed 100 billion. We think it will easily go to 150 billion by 2030. But also memberships in gyms, participation in gym classes, and all of that is through the roof. Because something powerful happens when we, as humans, experience things together. Sports events in particular are booming, not just in attendance, but also in emotional investments, if you really measure it. But that growth, of course, is not limited to sports alone. The lines between what we see as sports events, entertainment, music, retail, all of that is increasingly blurring. It's no longer, if you, let's say, you go to watch a match, whether it's NFL or Champions League, it's not about just watching a match. It's about being part of a lifestyle, a culture, a moment, an experience. And really forward-thinking brands are taking note and making use of it. They're not just sponsoring events, that's a bit old world, old school. They're even co-creating them. They're investing into community activation, mixed-use stadiums, immersive, high-experience value happenings that do more than sell products, but really create loyalty and brand value. And that trend also extends well beyond the immediate arena. Look at fitness, right? You might assume that digital classes and on-demand workouts would dominate, but actually over 80% of consumers still prefer in-person fitness classes. Why? Well, if you really go and do the research, you find that what people most crave is motivation, and they really feed off group energy. And also, they want connection, real-life connection. So that resurgence of real-life engagement is not a rejection of digital. It's a recognition of a part that digital cannot replace, right? The emotional intensity of being there. And that, we believe, is something that is coming back at full force and will continue to do so. So with that, we've given you a spotlight of each of the 5 trends and are ready for any questions.
think Chris is coming back on, but I think we just have to give him a moment.
Hello. Thank you. I'm here. Thanks, Alex. Thank you there, Emma. Just wondering if there are any questions either in the chat or in the Q&A. I don't see any at this stage.
Not in the Q&A.
Don't see anything in the QA. Don't see anything in the chat. Yeah, can't see anything there at this stage. So I guess you've done such a great job of giving us all the content that you've answered all the questions, Alex and Emma. Just another moment there. No, look, it doesn't look like there are any, but obviously if anything comes up, we'll feed them through to you. There were great presentations, scary numbers we're hearing from Johan, but yeah, no questions at this stage. So I think we'll wrap it up and let you head off. Thank you so much for overcoming that fire alarm and getting to join us, Alex, and thank you, Emma. Wonderful to see you. I last saw Emma a couple of weeks ago in Xiamen in China, which was fantastic to present at their annual General Assembly. So thanks for that opportunity, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. And obviously very passionate about working with you on this program, as you know, Emma.
Thanks very much, Chris. Thanks to you as well for the opportunity, and to the World Athletics team. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Emma. So, a couple of quick takeaways that I took from that, the three key things that I think are really relevant to our industry. Obviously, that massive group of inactive people that is potentially a target for us, but the realization that we need to work with engaging the already engaged, but in parallel engaging with the inactive, and so often maybe there's people that surround us that might be volunteers in our event that are not necessarily participating as runners, as maybe one idea. I know we've got a wonderful case study coming up from UBS later about how they're engaging inactive kids in India. We'll hear more about that. I think this, and we're certainly starting to see it, this active lifestyle as an identity, and we'll talk a little bit more about something around that. We've got Charlotte Melchert on there, is going to be talking about some things around the business model, and certainly the identity part of it is part of that discussion we're going to have. And then this demand for live sports experiences, which is absolutely being mirrored in our industry. I'm not sure how many of you saw London Marathon's ballot, 1.1 million applications, up from 830,000 last year, and this landscape of sellout events. So, great opportunities for us to continue that, but how do we bring some of the unengaged and inactive along? So thank you again to Emma and Alex there, and we'll move now on to our next segment, and I'm delighted to welcome I was hoping to welcome Danny Townsend, who is the CEO of Surge Sports Investment from Saudi Arabia. Doesn't look like he's joined us, but hopefully we'll patch him in when he does. We have Sam Lee, who's the founder and general partner of Calvert Drive Ventures, joining us from Auckland at nearly 1 o'clock in the morning. Thank you so much, Sam. Great to see you. If you'd like to turn on your camera, there you are. Nice to see you on screen. And someone who's usually just up the road from me in Malaysia, but is currently joining us from London, Sam Middlehurst, who's the co-founder of Fresh Events, for those of you that might know the music run. Welcome, Sam. Wonderful to have you joining us. I'm going to jump out and let you start the conversation. We'll keep working here. We've certainly turned your video on, but for some reason it's not coming on. We'll keep working on that in the essence of time. I'll hand it over to you to start what's currently going to be a chat with Sam, the two Sams, and we'll try and get Danny in.
Great. Thanks very much, Chris. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
The video on. Sam, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Sam?
I'm very good. Well, nice of you to join us at this time of the evening. I was down in Auckland a couple of weeks ago, so I know how difficult it is when you're calling in from the other side of the world.
Well, it's a good place to be. I get to talk to US, I get to talk to Europe, just sort of at the opposite ends of the day, which makes some days longer than others.
Yeah. Well, do you want to start by giving a quick introduction of yourself and how you find yourself kind of investing in sports?
Yeah, sure. So started my career as an attorney, worked for a big firm in New York, and really wanted to be in sports and entertainment. Did some internships in the space, and kind of got lucky when one of my partners moved over to the NBA. So I decided to follow him. So I was VP there for about 3-4 years. Worked on a lot of global deals, a lot of digital streamings, and got met pretty much everybody that's in the NBA universe, and then was approached by the CEO of a company that was a partner of ours, and it's a company called Weibo out of China. And as you guys may know, it's the biggest open social media platform in China. So very much involved with having brands, doing a lot of their marketing in China through the platform. But also we did live streaming as well of major sporting events around the world. So became head of sports there, was there for almost 7 years, which is pretty long. Never thought I'd stay that long, but it was just a really interesting role that I took on, where obviously with the social media platform, manage all of the foreign accounts, whether it's league, team, athletes, agencies, you name it. And then also bought a lot of the rights in the world. Which gave me a great, perspective into all the different sports verticals and the different IP and brands. And also I helped create one of the largest amateur events in the world at that time, which is called the Sina Golden League, which is a basketball league, which we started with very much at the grassroots level with over 180 cities in China. We also built it into an elite competition as well, where we had a lot of the 3-on-3 Olympians in our game. So we the media rights, we sold sponsorships, so sort of a very small version of the NBA. So I was kind of glad to have been a part of that. And it was very fun to build. And then COVID hit, and Sam, I know we met in Singapore previously, the COVID. So when COVID hit, I was actually down in New Zealand. My wife is from here, and she was pregnant with our second kid, and so we were down here, and then I was just never able to leave, really. And so during 2020 and 2021, started looking more at the sports industry from an investment perspective. I was already doing some advisory for companies, for friends who were starting their companies prior to COVID, and then it kind of ballooned into what it is now. And thankfully, a couple of the early startups that I was advising at that time did very well. One of them is a company called Socios, which created fan token concept for a lot of the major European and then later on the US league teams. So I helped them with introducing them to the teams and structuring some of those deals. And I still talk to them to this day. So that's a really good exit that I've had. And then along the way, I've had a few other pretty positive outcomes as well with some of my investments. So I think probably a year or so after, I came out here and COVID hit, I started my own investment vehicle, Calvert Ventures, and basically investing my own capital in the sports tech space. I'm very bullish on the area. I think I compare it to fintech or health tech 20, 30 years ago, where it's really, a fast growing area that is complementing a massive industry, right? The way that fintech, have really supported the financial industry. I really see sports tech doing that. And I think there's just so much going on in this area. There's so many verticals that I'm looking at and I'm focusing on. I'm investing into health and fitness and betting and fan engagement and broadcast technology and all these other things that are there. So it's great. It's I feel like there's enough going on, and then there's also enough potential exit strategy, when it comes to whether M&A opportunities or IPO opportunities, that it is slowly becoming a major investment sector, which it was not 20 years ago, right? So when you look at, for example, the betting industry, you have guys like DraftKings and FanDuel acquiring other companies, and that's something that you really didn't see in the sports industry 10, 20 years ago.
Great. So I guess if we just put a bit of context around it for everyone on the call who are not as familiar with the investment landscape, you yourself invest your own capital. You're kind of, I would say, in the venture capital space. So you're investing at what life cycle of a company? Quite early? Like where are you putting your money to work?
That's a good question. I think because it is my own capital, I'm not managing other people's money. So different than a venture capital fund that has very specific terms, whether it's the length of the fund or specific thesis or a specific area or specific check size. I don't have those restrictions. So it's I don't really have specific details that I need to fulfill. Usually what happens is I'm looking at things that have high potential. I'm not. So I think to characterize myself, I'm kind of a super angel / advisor, where I do bring what I see as strategic fit for a lot of these startups, where I'm able to help them when it comes to strategy or relationships in the industry or fundraising. So a lot of those tends to be a little more early stage. But I have made more later stage investments just because those are obviously potentially closer to exit, right? So when you look at earlier stage companies, the chance of the earlier stage companies failing is quite high, and also there's a much longer time frame when it comes to potential exits. Whereas if you're in the B round or C round or D round of these companies, and potentially an M&A opportunity is right around the corner. So early I've gone from incubating projects even because I'm just being an advisor or some other role to much later stage where I'm writing a bigger check.
Okay, so I'm gonna try and play some of those things back to you, because I think it's really important to unpack that. The first thing that when we think about capital coming into an industry or a sector is to understand the type of capital. Okay, so you are investing your own capital, okay, which means you have full control. You're not investing to a mandate, and you don't have to worry about other people's money. That gives you the flexibility about the stage of growth that you deploy your capital. So you can choose to go very early, where the risk might be higher because the business is not as proven, or you can go slightly later, where it could be closer to an exit, where you can get a return on that capital that you put in place. I think for a lot of people who are not familiar with how investments work, just understanding the type of capital that you're speaking to is very important, and also understanding those other things that you bring to the table. So what I heard there was you're bringing capital, but you're also bringing strategic expertise, which is going to be able to help that company via an operational perspective. Obviously, your experience in the sector gives you the ability to bring a network to the table as well. So are those some of the things that you bring to the table when you're having conversations with people? Like, how does that work?
Let me take a step back. I think just to clarify, and Sam, this is really great to clarify a lot of these things. I think taking a step back in terms of when you're talking about different stages, there's venture capital and then there's private equity, right? And then there are the types of companies that you're investing into. So private equity tends to come in when it's a later stage companies that may perhaps are at a slower growth stage that may or may not exit, right? So so a lot of the companies, when we're talking about technology specifically, we're talking a lot of the companies that are starting from scratch and you're building a technology and you're trying to scale very quickly. And those tend to be the ones that venture capital guys look at, because we tend to be a little bit earlier and you're looking to do a bigger multiple on your capital. Versus the private equity guys, and this is very relevant to sports, is that you do have some companies in the sports industry that are not quote unquote venture capital backed type companies, because they're not growing at 100x. They're not growing in that type of multiple that you need for early stage, but they are still great growth companies. And when you're talking about the sports industry, a lot of times, the event space, companies that are just running events, or companies that are supporting the events business, or supporting the technology, the broadcast technology business, they may not grow at very high multiples, but they're great business, and those tend to be the companies that private equity will get behind, right? And they have a whole different business model. And then when you look at the venture capital funds who are investing at different stages, they also have a different business model, right? The earlier you go, the more you're looking for the home runs or the 100 times type companies, because that's what you need, because you have a high possibility of failure. So let's say 80% of the companies you invest into turns out to be going to zero, then your 20% needs to make up the fund, right? And you can only do that if you're hitting home runs. Whereas for later stage private equity, you can easily do 2x or 3x easily by just having this company grow 2 or 3 times. And so there's a big difference, and there's a big spectrum in terms of that philosophy, and obviously it's very much dependent on what stage you are at in terms of investing into the companies. And then your second question about me personally, I think I've proven over the last 7-8 years that when I come in, I help out the company in a variety of different ways. A lot of that is, a lot of the companies are obviously looking for fundraising. That's sort of top of mind, but some founders are very good at that, but they don't have the relationships in the sports industry. So that's something else I could help out with. And then also I have founders that I talk to very frequently, and they just want to bounce things off the wall. They just want to talk what happened this week, and what are things that's bothering them, and I try to be there to kind of support that as well. So it's really, kind of being the Swiss knife to be able to provide support wherever needed. I think a lot of investors do that as well. I probably do that more just because I have more companies that are more early stage, and I do this full time. So I have a little more time to dedicate to the founders to do that.
So if we, now that we've kind of understood a little bit about, capital and the stages of growth and where it comes in, maybe let's have a look at sport in general, and I'll try and unpack the question, who's putting money in sport at the moment? And then once we've kind of got that top level bit, let's drop down and go, well, who's putting money in running, and what are they putting it in, and why are they making those investments? So if we can quickly talk about sport and then spend more time on running, that would be great.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. Just to continue what I was saying before, just to get the private equity guys out of the way, you have a lot of individuals or organizations that invest into sport from a private equity perspective. And what I mean by that is they're not investing into a early stage or even late stage technology company. They're investing into things like a league or a team or an agency, or an event agency, or an athlete, team agency, because those again don't fall under kind of where I operate, which is sort of in the sports tech world. So when you're saying, well, sports industry, there's a lot of the investments, a lot of the large checks are going into some of these more private equity type deals, right? So when you see somebody buying into a league or a team, or someone acquiring a data provider, or some of those guys, that's kind of where those will fall into. And I would say, they're mostly, or there's a lot of institutions who are doing that now, that you're hearing about, buying private equity, buying into teams. But there's also a lot of high net worth individuals who, started by buying a team, but, that snowballed into an organization that has multiple teams under it. They may be investing in other things. They may be creating their own fund. And then when they create a sports tech fund, that's starting to invest into some of the stuff that I'm talking about, which is more related to technology companies in the sports industry, right? So just to separate
those technology companies are really, providing a service to multiple players who are in that kind of level that you've just described there, the teams, the leagues, the events.
Well, they could, or I mean, I think sports is like what I was saying before is such a broad industry now that it really wasn't the case even 5-10 years ago that you can have a health and fitness company like Peloton, right? I feel like that's a great example where you may not think that kind of falls under sports, but certainly does falls under health and fitness. You can have betting companies, you can have a fan engagement tool like Socios, and so it's quite broad. A lot of times that you're not necessarily servicing the leagues and the teams. Actually, I think some of the companies that all they do is service leagues and teams, it's quite narrow. I whenever I encounter one of those, I try to encourage them or try to seek out ways that their technology could be used for things outside of sports, right? And maybe you're building something for a team, but can this be used for entertainment, or can this be used for in some other industry? Because that's the only way that you can build up a big enough TAM so that your company becomes generates more revenue rather than just the 30 teams or the 100 teams that are available.
And so in terms of what you're seeing, and we kind of zero in more on mass participation and running specifically, like what are you seeing there in terms of investment?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, for me personally, I don't have any investment specifically in the running vertical, but I certainly have some that are adjacent, to running. So in the health and fitness space, Hyperice, which is a recovery tool or a suite of recovery products. They're the official recovery partner for the NBA. So that's an investment that we made a few years ago. Certainly, a lot of runners and amateur participants use that. And a couple of years ago with COVID, we saw a lot of these indoor or virtual fitness programs that came out. So I made a couple of investments there in those. So I think health and fitness, really encompasses running. So I'm a runner. I think Sam, when we chatted, I probably wasn't back then, but I just talked to Chris today that I'm running Sydney Marathon in August, and I'm doing a 70K race in October. So
fantastic.
I've bit the definitely the bug has bitten me, and so it definitely is a space that I look at very carefully. I mean, I look at Strava, who just made another acquisition, Runner, last month. So it's great whenever you see acquisitions like that. It excites me because it makes me think that there could potentially be the next one that comes around that could be acquired. And what I'm seeing now, with running clubs, with all these events like Chris mentioned, with London being so full, I think Sydney, I got lucky on the ballot. I think we had something like 100,000, so not quite a million. But I think I think all these things point to potentially great companies coming out of it. And that's quite exciting. I think that's I think amateur sports is an area that is just going to continue to really skyrocket in the next 10-20 years. And running is the easiest. Bike you need equipment, and anything else you need equipment, but running is very simple. And I'm part of running clubs here in New Zealand, and they're great. You get to meet a lot of people, and they really encourage everyone to be healthy. Is really like the best addiction that you can have. So I think in this space, I think there's definitely the potential for more companies like Strava to come through. And step in the crypto space is another one. Did extremely well, and obviously they had a bit of an issue with after crypto kind of fell out of the last cycle. But companies like that, I think it's great. It helps with with engaging with the fans, and ultimately at the end of the day, if people are being more active, then it's a win-win for everybody.
No, I think some of those kind of tailwinds that are behind us, which were mentioned in the previous panel, around the people seeking out live in-person experiences, looking for motivation, that finish line, something to aim for, train for, connection. the focus on health and well-being, longevity, people spending more of their disposable income on those things that are important to them. I think those are all opportunities. And if you can actually, capture some of those opportunities, I think you can then attract people who want to participate in that.
I just saw the other day that this college, I think college or high school kid maybe, he created this app which basically allows anyone to take a photo of the food that they ate, and it pumps out nutritional facts, and then it accumulates it over 6 months and is able to tell you how well you ate, how you should be training and all those things.
Yeah.
And I think he did like $1.5 million in like the last 6 months or something. So, and it's just using AI, and it's quite smart kid to, create something like that. So, I think that's certainly something that's worth watching for, in that space.
Yeah, awesome. Chris has come on screen. I think he's giving us our time up.
No, thanks. There's just a question there that I wanted to pass on to Sam. So it's from Peter H, and we are pretty much out of time. So let's pass this on and just see your comments to it, Sam. Can you break down the sports tech sector in sub-segments? In which areas do you see most potential? Fan engagement, events, training?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned that a little bit before on that first question. There's a whole host of them, right? There's fan engagement. So the areas that I focus on: fan engagement, betting, health and fitness, fan engagement, broadcast technology, and then sort of miscellaneous. And miscellaneous as an emerging tech, as in crypto or AI or whatever the next big thing is, right? That's kind of part of what I worked on at MBA, was trying to say, well, whatever technology is coming in, we're always here. How do we incorporate the next big thing into what we're doing, right? So that's sort of my miscellaneous category. And then most potential, I think I always like fan engagement. I think, and I think when it comes to the running space, it's more user engagement rather than fan engagement. I think it just ways for people to feel engaged. How do you, I think my biggest thing with Strava is, well, it's great. It has my data and just pumps out the data, but tell me about this data, right? Like, tell me what can I do with it, right? Like, is there something that I can participate in? Is it something, can you give me like a really in-depth insight into this? So I think it's anything that allows the users to really engage with the product. I think that's really something that's, it's just a million cool things can come out of it, and I'm just waiting to see what's next.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sam Lee and Sam Middlehurst. Really appreciate you staying up so late in New Zealand. And Sam Middlehurst, you've stepped out of a workshop that you're running in London, especially to come and join us for this. So thank you both so much. Thank you for the insights. And unfortunately, Danny didn't make it. I'm sure he's got caught up somehow, but hopefully an opportunity to have him at another stage. Thanks so much to both of you.
Thanks, Chris.
Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye. Thanks. As we move on to our next segment, which is titled We Move the Kids, a case study on UBS Athletics Kids Club, India. Delighted to welcome Daniel Schenker, who's the CEO of DSPowerparts, joining us from Zurich. You're there, Daniel? Hey, Danny.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Chris.
Wonderful backdrop that you've got on your screen there, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. Joining us from Mumbai, Manjree Gohad, who's the Chief of Staff and Head of Communications from UBS. Hi, Manjree.
Hi. I think my video still doesn't work, but I'm glad to be here.
Okay, no worries. We'll keep trying to see if we can help you fix that here from the studio, but we can certainly hear you. And joining us from Lausanne, Zahir Khan, who's the Project Manager of DSPowerparts. And we're going to have a little conversation here. We're going to kick it off with a wonderful video which shows what's been achieved in this amazing event in India in its pilot year. Let's just play the video to start with. Sorry there, folks, got a bit of a technical hitch, as always, seems to happen. We played that video multiple times. We'll try and get it back for you at the end. But let's jump into it and start, Danny. Love to hear from you. What makes the UBS Kids Cup particularly meaningful for children in India?
I guess, as we heard before in the presentation from before, which I said that 31% of adults are inactive. I guess that's exactly what we try to play here obviously, if the adults as our role model for the children are inactive, that doesn't help the children to be active. And in a country like India, where we have additional challenges like living in a very dense cities like Mumbai, like Hyderabad, and with maybe some weather conditions which not always support outside activities. I think that makes it for us very, very important that I think to have an initiative which supports children to become active, play, don't lose the playfulness is very, very important.
Amazing. And I mean, there's that, I hope the viewers can see that incredible image behind you of, the fact that you've taken this to all parts of India in different environments, and 100,000 participants in the first year in the pilot is pretty amazing, and maybe an opportunity to, segue across to Zahir and hear exactly how this collaboration with schools work. Over to you, Zahir.
Hi, Chris. So yeah, if you see, schools play a very important role to take this to their doorstep, because 100,000 kids, to get them moving, it's not easy. So once we see that the schools are totally much aligned with us, that they want the kids to move, we have a bit of education with them. We share with them the necessary tools. We give them a toolkit which consists of all the material like a stopwatch and various other equipment which you need. If you see, our program is very, very basic. It consists of running, throwing, and jumping, which is very fundamental. If you do any sports, it is required to do that. So we are sharing with them some do-it-yourself videos, some handbook, and all those things. They organize the event on their own in their school premises. Sometimes we also help them by sending them trainers and other additional help to the school, so that they can effectively organize the event. Once these events are organized, we get all the data and information from the school. We organize the regional final kind of them, which is purely organized in such a way that it's a day for the kids, and they should feel like a star on that day, and they should get the hang of the thing. And you never know, might be they will get inspired in such certain way, and they can take it to the next step.
Sounds amazing. So, I mean, you talk about that number of schools, I mean, and sending staff to help. How many staff were involved? It's volunteers, I guess, it's full-time staff. The teachers are obviously a key component of that. But just to give us a sense of, what kind of staff helped to get 100,000 kids through this program?
So I can give you an idea, like, let's talk about the city like Mumbai. In the city like Mumbai, we have divided in 5 regions, like Mumbai city, Mumbai suburbs, Thane, Raigad, Palghar. I'm just giving you an idea. I know a lot of our audience have not heard these names beyond Mumbai. So we are working with a network of PE teachers and sports enthusiasts. We give them a bit of training, like a train the trainer. We will have a workshop for them, how this exactly concept is made. We have made some do-it-yourself videos on YouTube so that you can go on the channel, you can exactly see it. We have little bit templatized the entire process so that it's easy to implement, little bit less confusion, and they can implement it well. So we have almost more than 100 plus active people with us, and a lot of volunteers who support us, taking to each and every around majority of school in Mumbai, I can say.
Yeah, and so, we've got the great image behind Danny, we've got the image behind you, which looks like it's a grass track. The video, which we'll hopefully get up to play, is on a proper tartan synthetic track. Looks like it's adaptable to be able to take place in pretty much any environment, and really simple.
Yes, it is. It is very much.
Amazing. And obviously with all of these things, it takes partnership to make it happen. We've spoken about the partnership with schools and teachers already, but UBS, and this, as I understand it, it's a concept, and Danny, maybe you can talk to it a little bit later in terms of the history of it as well, but came out of Switzerland and was with a partnership there, and then came to India with UBS. Maybe just touch on that briefly, and then we'll throw over to Manjree to see why it's such a great fit for UBS.
Yeah, obviously the UBS Kids Cup is a concept which basically was already done in Switzerland since now, I don't know, 14, 15 years. And it's a very proven concept which worked to promote the children athletics again in school. And I guess it's a great initiative which helped really to promote athletics again in the Swiss school environment, where we have lost it a bit. And obviously, through this initiative, athletics, track and field became very, very popular again in Switzerland. And as a small country, we were very, very successful on international stage again on European championships and world championships. And I guess through that, we were kind of thinking, if there is a country where this will really help to promote again the movement and the activity, I think India is really the thing to do. And I was very fortunate and very thankful that I found, again, partners with UBS in UBS India to support that initiative. And maybe Manjree can jump in here to explain it from her side.
Wonderful. Thanks, Danny. Manjree, over to you. Would really love to hear the insights from a UBS perspective, why it works so well for you.
Thank you, Chris and Danny. So I think, other than the long history and having handy frameworks that would, that we could immediately just utilize, I think there were three key things that we considered. So one, of course, is our engagement with the community in India, where we have a very holistic framework where we look at students from 6 months to 21 years, and we want to help them with child protection, nutrition, holistic development, education, so that they can transition into employability with good, strong futures ahead of them. Now, when we think of holistic development, while you can study, be in class, eat good food, some of that also depends on how physically healthy you are. And we thought that this initiative of Athletics Kids Cup was a fantastic fit into our overall view of how we look at community engagement. The other two pillars, of course, were how do we engage our own people? And I think one of the best things out of Athletics Kids Cup has been the way that we've been able to engage our people. There have been more than 2,700 hours of volunteering that have come out of it. And the kind of stickiness it creates for an organization when you have initiatives like this that hold people back to the organization. And then last, of course, is, how we become more visible in India. So we look at schools across segments, right? So it's not just underprivileged, it's the private schools, it's the influentially private schools. And a lot of these kids have parents who are probably in the talent market, who are potential candidates to join us. And what a great way to connect with these potential candidates at a neutral, venue. Let them know that, what a great organization UBS is, and that, we are invested in the country, in the community, and in doing the right thing. So I think it was really a beautiful fit from all ways for us. And that's why I think we were super keen when Danny expressed interest that, yes, let's do it in India as well.
Amazing. So 2,700 volunteering hours, staff potentially bringing their children along. And I love that idea of basically looking at making UBS as almost a side benefit, being seen as an employer of choice and someone great to work for.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So let's talk about season one. 100,000 kids, I think 1,000 schools engaged. What were some of the highlights, some of the success stories, I guess some real emotional moments of seeing those kids out there running with their parents, the volunteers? Have you got some examples to share maybe, either yourself, Manjree, or Zahir?
I mean, I'm happy to start off. So like I said, 2,700 hours of volunteering, yes. But I think a lot of employees actually came out to me saying, this is just wonderful. Being on a field instead of being, on a desk and typing away stuff onto our computers. So one was that where, employees find it just as amazing and engaging as kids do to be on a field. And somewhere when, you are telling a child that, yeah, let's get moving, it also encourages the employee to do that. So we know a lot of employees who after, being part of Athletics Kids Cup have now started on this mission of, wanting to be a little more active themselves as well. Zach, you want to share some of the kids' stories maybe?
Yeah, so if you see our Athletics Kids Cup event, you can see now they were part of a family gathering. The kid is not just coming. We saw in some time it's coming with the parents. We saw the grandparents also coming. It's like a small picnic. It's like a day out for the family. So which was not so popular. I mean, we are like cricket is everything in India. And imagine the entire family is coming for something like athletics, and that too a kid like an 8-year-old kid or 9-year-old kid. The kid might be feeling I'm really special. The whole family is taking me for my event. And when you see the venue, when the team will see, when we play the video, how nicely we have tried to put on that day so that the kid should feel it's his day. Everything is put for him only. He is the star. No chief guest, nothing. At the end, every kid who is participating is like a chief guest for us. And whatever the best possible things, whether like a photo finish or whatever you think, whatever is best available, we are able to access in that market. We try to put on that day. So kids were really very happy, I can say. And again, then the kids also see the value proposition. When I was connecting with some of the kids, they were saying, my favorite sport is cricket. Or sometimes they say football. And they came with a t-shirt of a Messi or Ronaldo. But when they see when I'm doing a running, throwing or jumping, this is aiding me to be a better cricketer or a better footballer. And if they are too much in sports, you all have seen that IPL, Indian Premier League, everyone is thinking about it. Like they want to be like these stars sometime. So they say this is really enabling them to do something bigger, So as we say, athletics is like the foundation for all the sports. So I see the kids really find it like a primary school, which is like a building block, essential building block to get the wings and take their flight in the sports world. So I can say that's a great success that they are able to see in this project.
Wonderful. And we had World Federation of Sporting Goods earlier talking about the impact of this global inactivity. I see some of the images and pictures you have. Many of those kids aren't even wearing shoes. I mean, it's barefoot. So that's the start that you're potentially giving them in a country like India, where they can be active without even having to invest in a pair of shoes. Makes it, I guess, even reinforces further how accessible running is. And then the point you make, this opportunity to take it on to football and cricket and other mainstream sports as well.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So talk about then, we spoke about the origination in Switzerland and then adapting it to the Indian market. What were some of the challenges that you had to overcome, and were there ways that the program potentially got tweaked along the way to make it more adapted to the Indian market?
I mean, the biggest challenge, if you'll ask, is the infrastructure. If you talk like a city like Mumbai, finding an open space is a big deal. If there is an open space, someone is looking to put a building over there because a lot of people are pouring to the city from the rural areas to find some better livelihood in an urban part of the country. So again, finding an infrastructure is a very big challenge. Just to share with a larger audience, it's very tough to find a long jump pit in the country. I mean, in a city like Mumbai. So again, somehow we little bit tweak our system that how, if you don't have a long jump pit, what you can do. We came up with a triple running jump that you need a little bit of space where you did the 60-meter run, do it over there. In India, like we also celebrate a lot of festivals and all. Sometimes you go on a public space. We try to like say, like you can be a little bit creative where you can just try to organize this event. So we try to suggest them in different ways how they can do it. And when you talk about country like Switzerland, here I think the sports is a way of life. It's a very, very part of the culture, the education system. If I'll talk about India, parents still give a lot of importance to academics. So somehow we need to little bit tell them that being little bit active, it's going to be a synergy effect, It is going to help you to perform well in education. And it's beyond. I mean, the world is getting beyond just education or academics only. So these are some of the challenges which we see initially. And again, as I mentioned, cricket. People are too much about cricket and seeing some professional aspect of it now in our country, because you can imagine a country of 1.4 billion. So you're always thinking there is a little bit of competition. So in that, they're always looking what at the end is going to help them to get some livelihood. And so these are the challenges which we face. But yeah, since they have seen it, that it's really helping it. So but it's a tough deal. We just have 1,000 schools. We want to really increase some to 1 million, I can say, kids from 100,000. So it's a tough deal for sure.
Well, I mean, incredible. Congratulations. I mean, under those circumstances, to get 100,000 kids, it seems like there's an enormous opportunity, and we'll come and speak to Danny a little bit about that in a moment. I'd like to come back to you, Manjree. You had Neeraj Chopra as your ambassador. Maybe for the uninitiated, just a quick overview of Neeraj and his achievements and what role he played in inspiring these young kids.
I think Neeraj, is the perfect poster child for everything that we want to promote through Athletics Kids Cup, right? He comes from humble backgrounds. He comes from a background that, was not extremely digitally savvy. He's someone who has worked really hard. He has faced the issues of, coming from a lower socioeconomic background, not really being a non-vegetarian for, a long part of his life, and not having access to the kind of trainings, the fields, everything that Zach mentioned, right? But it is sheer great determination that has led him to that. And he himself, as a human being, recognizes that. He realizes that, sport is not just about winning and losing, but about having mutual respect, coexisting, understanding how we work with each other and how we excel. And that is really the energy that he brought to Athletics Kids Cup. I mean, you see kids on the ground, you see them playing around, but when you see a Neeraj coming and speaking to them, there is a shift in how they start perceiving what they're doing on the field. Parents take it more seriously when they see somebody like a Neeraj actually associated with an initiative like this. And it gives us a lot of credibility when we speak to other partners, other brands, as well as our own employees, right? So I think Neeraj is really that force that has brought seriousness to what we do, but also, shift of focus that it's not about just winning and losing. Yes, that's part of life, but also what sports can teach you to actually live a good life in the future. So, a fantastic advisor, guide, and partner, I would say, to the initiative.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. Let's come back to you, Danny, to wrap it up, and then we'll try and play the video. But maybe whilst you're speaking, Zahir, you had some great images there. Why don't you just play those slides, and Danny can speak over the top of them in the meanwhile, and people can see those in the background, some incredible images of the event. But Danny, in terms of plans, incredibly successful first year. Where does it go from here? What's year 2 and 3 and beyond?
So we're very pleased with the way it happened, and we really put our main focus on Mumbai this year for the season 1. And you see some of the picture, and everybody can see how many challenges we had actually to put it up. So this is very, very an inclusive event, and that's very, very important for us, that we really cover from the richest school to the poorest, and everybody can participate. Now, this year, where we want to go, we're going to implement it very big as well in Mumbai, in Hyderabad, and in Pune. And I know for non-Indian, that sounds like, oh, there's just 3 cities, but we always forget about how big these cities are. I always compare it. That's like we would say we would do it in Paris, Berlin, and Rome if a European content. So that's going to be quite big. And then we're going to be up north as well. We're going to do a test trial in Chandigarh together with Abhinav Bindra Foundation, where we're going to do some trials there. And then we're looking into as well doing things with Neeraj Chopra's his own foundation in Haryana, the state in the north where he comes from. And then the next one is exploring in Bangalore, what if we could expand in this direction. So you see, there is plenty of opportunities. The big challenge for us is really, how do we manage all these opportunities? Because I don't want to make it just big for the numbers' sake. The goal is, how can we build this gradually for the next 10 years? We have a 10-year plan. And I think that's what really is needed. It's not a quick win. I always say, we're not organizing an event. This is not what we do. It's a movement. We move to kids. We want to do a movement, and it will take 10 years to see all the good things and the benefit from the whole initiative. So there's no race, basically. It's more coming back to the running content. It's a marathon which we need to do. So how can we sustainably grow it in a long, sustainable way that quality is secured as well? Because at the end of the day, we should never forget we deal with children. And if there's something to be looked after very well after, then I think that's the children which we need to protect in no matter what, of course.
Amazing. I mean, brilliant initiative, and obviously wish you all the best in terms of taking that forward. Thank you so much, the three of you, for taking time to share with us. We're going to try and play the video now. Let's do that first, and then we'll sign it off. Thank you so much, Danny, Manjree, and Zahir, for joining us. Thanks for sharing that wonderful story, and wishing you all the best for the next year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks a lot, Chris, for having us.
Thank you. Thank you. As we move on to our next segment, which is the Brand Finance Global Marathons Report, which I'm sure some of you would have already seen, but delighted to have Hugo Hensley, who's the head of sports services at Brand Finance, who's going to come and join us and take us through a short presentation, some of the methodology, and some of the findings. Welcome, Hugo.
Yeah, Chris. Thanks for having me. A lot to follow up there. Yeah, I'm going to give a quick intro to Brand Finance and what we do. This was the result of about 5 months work, and this is a probably 45-minute presentation that I'm going to change from marathon to sprint mode, and we're going to try and get through as much as we can in about 15 minutes. So if you could let me know when we get this up on screen. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, Brand Finance is technically an accountancy. We focus on brand valuation, which can be used for technical purposes, so things like transactions or tax or licensing rate setting, but we also do it for strategic purposes, so to help brand managers understand how to grow their space in the market, help set marketing budgets, understand the effectiveness of marketing or sponsorships. And over the years, Brand Finance has been building up sort of, I guess, a public portfolio of studies that we do. So these have included things like commercial brands. So we release reports on the global 500 most valuable brands. That's maybe the one that people would have seen us from. We also do analysis of place brands. So we look at things like nation branding, the top city brand. So what does it mean to be a globally important and influential city, as well as things like soft power. So how do nations influence others through strong brands and strong reputation. And then the last section, which is what I head up within Brand Finance, I'm the head of sports services, is studies of sporting brands. The sort of the longest going of those is our football 50 study, which I think has been going for over 15 years now. But we also have done reports on things like the Olympics or the NBA. And so last year we got together and we realized there was this sort of strange category that split across these different areas, and that was marathon. So you've got an aspect of these are businesses, I think London Marathon revenues in the tens of millions, and the same is true around the world. They're also sporting brands, so they attract top sporting talent. They're obviously integrating the sporting world. They have some of the behaviors such as broadcasting and sponsorship that other sporting brands would have, but they're also very closely linked to place brands. Their attractiveness will be dependent on the city and other things that make strong place brands, such as safety, such as attractiveness to travel to, such as familiarity. And so they're a really interesting crossover. And so what we wanted to do was try and access a space that we thought was a little bit underserved in terms of data analysis and proof points and credibility around how strong and important these brands are. So we did sort of 3 main things. We measured brand strength. So that's one of the key sort of, I guess, service areas of Brand Finance. And is based on understanding how a brand influences its stakeholders. So at the top, that means, are people aware of it? Are they familiar with it? Does it have positive perceptions? Those could be emotional perceptions, such as it's got strong heritage, or it's cool, or functional things. So for a telecom network, that might be it has good coverage. For a marathon, that might be it's got a great course, or is very safe. And then also look at positive. How do those perceptions drive positive behaviors? So are people applying to enter that ballot? And are they running the race? But also, are they going to volunteer? Are they going to donate to runners in that race if they're running for a charitable cause? And so a combination of those brand metrics, we then distill into a single score, which we call brand strength. And that's what one of the key rankings that we have in our report is the top 50 strongest marathon brands. Another aspect we look at is brand value. I'm, as I said, technically an accountant, so I have to build a financial model somewhere. And what this means is, how important is the brand as an asset within the business? It doesn't mean that much on its own. If I told you the number was 1 million, 10 million, 100 million, you might say, is that good? But what we do this for is to allow it to be benchmarked and compared to other, I guess, financial numbers that you might see, such as the revenue, such as the value of businesses, and understand that the brand is a really important asset for driving the financial success of these organizations. And we do that by incorporating the brand strength and that business model to understand how much of that is driven by the brand. And then the last point we looked at was connecting it a bit more to the analysis Brand Finance does around cities, place brands, and tried to determine what is the economic impact of those top 50 marathon brands. What are they giving back to their communities in terms of economic engagement with those environments? So spend, but also some of the knock-on effects of that, and showing, I guess, to another stakeholder audience, not the marathon organizers, not the marathon runners, but things like the regulators, which in this case might be a city council, or it could be, athletics bodies and things like that, that these are really positive events and that they're actually very productive for the locations that they're happening in. So I'll just run through as quickly as I can sort of these three main areas with some little insights in each section. This isn't meant to be an exhaustive review of our report. I'm sure Chris can put a link somewhere so you can go and find it. But also it's to sort of give an intro to the content that's in here, and hopefully if you've got questions, questions about specific marathon, about the industry generally, about whether these assumptions or analysis can be applied to, say, different sports or different types of events, just drop me a question and hopefully we'll be able to answer that, as the analysis is a lot deeper than I can get through in this sort of condensed speed run that we're going through now. So to start, if we look at just the strongest marathon brands, what we measured is 100 in total and published a ranking of the top 50. And so cut to the chase. Number 3, we had Schneider Electric Marathon de Paris. Number 2, TCS New York City Marathon. And number 1, luckily for us, as we were releasing this report just before London Marathon happened a couple of Sundays ago, number 1 was TCS London Marathon. But what does that mean? Obviously, it's that combination of market research metrics that we built up. So what we did is went to market to conduct a survey among almost 10,000 total respondents, of which 4,000 were keen runners and marathon runners, in markets that were designed to be representative of not just the world's running audience, but the running audience who are more informed and are likely to potentially have international knowledge of top marathons and potentially travel for those. So what we call that sort of deeper familiarity of the sector. And so within that, we covered over 30 metrics for each one, as well as profiling information. So what are the behaviors of these runners, of these general public? What causes them to interact with marathons in the ways that they do? And what does that mean we can tell about a strong marathon that influences behaviors in a more positive way than others? So how does London Marathon get those ballot numbers, but also how does it attract that much charitable engagement? So if we get to the sort of the list of the top 50, maybe you'll be able to pick out a name you're looking for in here, but it is all in the report. You can see at the top you've got London, New York, Paris, but but a really nice even spread actually within this analysis of marathons from the Americas. So a lot of them US, but we also see Rio and Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires in the ranking, many from Europe, so London, Paris, Berlin, 50,000 plus people in Europe, but also a whole lot more. Valencia, so we know it's a very popular marathon, as well as some of the smaller ones that might not be as publicly known, but very popular among a more aware audience. We also see a decent number from Asia Pacific, and 2 in the top 50 from Africa, with Lagos and Cape Town coming in there. Interestingly, something we found, didn't include it in our ranking, is it wrangled too many people, I think, when we were discussing it, but was that 2 or 3 of the biggest races in Africa are actually the ultra marathons. So the 2 Oceans, the Comrades Run, and the Marathon des Sables are actually sometimes stronger than the marathons that we see as, I guess, that bounded 26.2 mile event that we were ranking here, just to make sure that we didn't have to look at 10,000 races around the world. So what makes London, New York, Paris sit there at the top? That first access point in the research was, do people know it? So if we're looking here, we've got London, New York, Paris, Berlin, and Boston as our top 5 in the ranking. And you can see this green bar is how well known they are in their home market. So this is UK respondents. Only 14% don't know London Marathon, with a huge number saying they know a lot or a fair amount about it. But if we look at international respondents, so that would be those outside of the UK for London Marathon or outside the US for New York Marathon, we can see that actually New York and Boston Marathon score even higher on that international awareness and familiarity. This is a really key metric. If someone's going to travel for your marathon, if you're going to be able to sell that marathon to sponsors who want global exposure, this is a really key metric to understand about what does it mean to be a top marathon. An example of some of the other attributes that come into our assessment of brand strength are the functional, emotional sort of brand and image attributes. An example here, I'm taking just 3 of the top Japanese marathons. So you've got Tokyo International Marathon, which featured at 6th. It's one of the world marathon majors. It's a huge number of runners, but we also have Osaka Marathon at 30th and Nagoya Women's Marathon at 38th. You can see we balanced these against each other for very functional things. So do elite runners take part? Is it well organized? But also some of the sort of more emotional attachments that people might have to marathons. So does it have strong heritage and prestige? Is it accessible and inclusive? And across all of these metrics and attributes, this is a super simplification. We've got 80 marathons. We've actually got about 15 of these attributes. And we also, when we do the analysis, take into account what are the perceptions among marathon runners, people who've run 3 races. What are the perceptions among people who maybe run a few 5Ks every month, but might run a marathon in the future? And then what are the perceptions among people who have never and would perhaps never consider themselves as ever running a marathon, but actually may engage through different angles. So they might volunteer, their company might be a sponsor, and they might be very likely to donate to a member of family or a friend who's running the marathon. So there's a lot more depth to each of these data points that sits in our ranking and influences that score for each marathon. The last thing we look at is can these positive attributes influence choice? So if we look compared to awareness in the US, we have New York, Boston, Chicago as the top 3 highest awareness. But actually, if we look at preference, so what is the marathon that people would like to run next? You see New York City and Boston very, very high up on 11%, but Chicago not converting that through to being a preferred marathon. If you ask someone who's run 4 or 5, Chicago is often right up there with their favorites. But one of the things we saw here is that the city brand isn't nearly as strong as New York or San Francisco, which has a higher preference, or LA. And also, it's much better known among that very informed audience and less of a desirable marathon for both local and international runners who might travel for it. They're just more likely to pick New York or Boston before Chicago, and that's, I think, a challenge for that one, and it was a challenge for us as it's so well known and so loved within the running community. But to share that actually there's a lot of nuance in here in how, perhaps linking back to how the guys at McKinsey were saying earlier, that there's a bit of a, I guess, separation within the audience, that you've got people who this is their complete lifestyle and they know everything about it, but you do also still need to reach out those who are being introduced to the category, and who are those people you're going to pick up as the growth that we're looking for in the future. So how did London come out top? Three of the key things that it really excelled in: super high familiarity. It's almost ubiquitously known in the UK. I don't think anyone who's in the UK or London could have avoided it in the last 2 weeks, but also abroad. London's a massively connected city, but it's also one of the best known marathons. It has the strongest home market perceptions. Essentially what I'm saying is that people in the UK, people in London absolutely love it. They think it's super safe. They think it's really well organized. They think it's got a great course. And they're really likely to engage with it in really positive ways, and especially charity, where it sort of streaks ahead in terms of its sophistication, its development of the charitable places, the way people champion, I guess, that brand themselves to attract money to the causes that they're supporting. And so those are three factors that where we see that London Marathon is really exceptional and just ahead of New York in our overall ranking. So once we've calculated brand strength for all of these marathons, we can have a little bit of a look at what the most valuable marathon brands are. What we mean by brand value here is not how much money does the marathon brand bring in each year, but actually what would the value be if we had to put it on the balance sheet. So a net present value. If I didn't own this marathon brand, I would have to license it from a third party to achieve the income, the revenue, the attractive proposition that I do. What would it cost me each year into the future to do that? Brought back to that sort of that net present value to say, what would it be on my balance sheet right now? The methodology we use, this is probably the most boring bit of the presentation, but it's called royalty relief. What I want to show here is that the first step and the most important one is understanding that brand strength. How does the brand influence stakeholders to drive financial performance? The next thing we look at is brand impact. So how important is brand in each of the different revenue categories that a business operates in? So for a marathon, it's that attracting sponsorship revenue is more brand driven than, say, attracting entry fees, and will differ again to attracting charitable donations around the event. And so each of these different revenue categories need to be considered. We also then have to forecast the revenues for each of the events, and then ultimately bring that back to the net present value. So incorporating some of the financial assumptions, such as the risk, such as the long-term growth rates for these events. And this is according to the industry standards for brand valuation. So each of these parts is technically matching the international standards for brand strength, as well as brand valuation. So we showed a bit of the info on brand strength earlier. Here's a bit of a breakdown of how the financials driven by these marathons compare. This isn't the number that you would see in the accounts, because I've included something such as the charity funds by runners as being driven, as financials being driven partially by the event. So I think anyone in the UK probably got a few messages saying, will you donate to my marathon campaign? I'm running for this charity. And our analysis is that people are more likely to donate when they see it attached to a brand like London Marathon. A stronger event brand is more likely to drive that income, and so some of that financials is attributed to the strength of these brands that we're looking at. You can see New York, London, Boston really streak ahead in terms of that, with a really significant proportion of the financials driven by the event, being that money coming through the runners' fundraising efforts. We also see commercial revenue. These are estimates by me. By the way, you also won't see these in accounts, and the organizer of these events are very private. They might tell me that these are completely wrong, but I'd love to hear what the more accurate numbers are. But I think we got pretty close. You can see that that's really significant, and that's a very highly brand-driven part of the revenue as well. Something that we don't see in here as strongly, especially in comparison to other major sporting events, is broadcast. If you think of the Premier League, another UK sporting entity, a massive part of the income of that organisation, and then the teams that form it will be that broadcast income. You can see there's a tiny slither here for broadcast for Tokyo Marathon. There's even been a piece here for London Marathon. They give that away essentially to the BBC as an effort to build strength of the brand and the exposure. And so that's a strategic decision that we see being made, but we also think it's a massive opportunity to bring these events to audiences in a more narrative format, increase engagement throughout the year, and I expect we'll see some interesting things, as mentioned by many of the race directors in our event, in the coming years around storytelling and bringing marathons to people in I guess a more traditional sort of broadcast sense, or in things like long form sporting documentaries. And so combining that brand strength analysis, the financials, we end up with our most valuable marathon brands. I'm going to display this on this grid because we see those two most important parts: driving revenue as well as having a strong brand. And when we look at who the top names are, we can see New York City Marathon has the most valuable brand, although a couple of points behind in terms of brand strength, over 50% more valuable than London Marathon. And that's purely because it drives more revenue, and especially in really key categories such as commercial. Behind them, you've got London Marathon, Boston and Chicago a little bit behind that, and then Tokyo, Berlin, Sydney coming up. And I'm just showing the World Marathon majors here. But I was assured at our event that Sydney Marathon won't be down here for long, as I think their application numbers have gone up many multiples since being accepted and qualifying to become the latest World Marathon major. So he said that actually they're not going to be that baby. Maybe I shouldn't have put them in pink as well at the back, but see a lot of development as that comes on. I know that Berlin and Tokyo are also adding, I think, sophistication to some of the revenue streams that perhaps that they haven't had in the past, in the same way that London and New York do around things like fundraising there. The next section I'm going to breeze through is a bit of the runner research. This is kind of the setup to understanding the economic impact, not all of it, but is the background to say, what do these runners do? What are their behaviors? And how can we try and understand them? Why are they making these decisions? And ultimately, what creates these giant events that can create a brilliant economic impact for cities? The first piece of analysis I pulled out was probably the last question on the survey, which was, if you've run a marathon, what was the best time you've achieved? And my question was, are UK runners slow? So we had this curve that sat way behind comparisons with France and the USA. And ultimately, when we looked a little bit closer into the data, what we saw was actually that's quite a nice story, and one that we've been telling all along, which is that London Marathon, which is by far the most common marathon for these UK runners to have taken part in, has a huge charitable element. It has a lot of people running for the first time. It has a lot of people running across a very wide sort of age and demographic range, and that brings your average time stamp. So people are more likely to be running in some of those slower times, as they're doing it for charitable causes. They're perhaps not keen runners, but they've been inspired to do it by the strength of the London Marathon brand and everything it stands for. So there's charitable elements, as well as the size and prestige of that event. Other things that we looked at: what's your average annual spend on running related expenses? So in pounds, you've got the most common amount to be between £250 and £500. You've got around over 40% of people spending over 500, 11% spending over £2,000. That means, you know, that's not summing up a total of running shoes, but that's people traveling around the world. That's people really, you know, to be spending that much, it has to be part of your lifestyle, a really key part of your annual expenditure. And so averaging this out, we got to around £684 average annual spend among this running audience. That's about $915 US. So this is a really significant investment, and I think speaks to that I guess intensity and lifestyle that people are bringing to the sport, as they're not just buying, you know, a new pair of shoes, but there's other technology that they're buying into, whether it's, you know, smartwatches, trackers, subscription services, as well as, you know, transport, travel, entry to these events. We also looked at things about sponsorship. So why are they a good opportunity for sponsors? Well, if you look at this grey section, this is non-runners, and we see that runners in blue and then marathon runners even more strongly in green skew towards more likely to be business decision makers. So for a B2B business, this is a huge reason to engage with marathon running, and is why I think when we saw that top three, you had two sponsored by TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, so not a consumer brand, but an IT services business, and one by Schneider Electric, so an engineering company. And that's because they're reaching this really attractive audience for a sponsor. And if we look at some of the data into one of those top sponsors, so TCS, you can see that among non-runners, 84% haven't heard of it. That drops by half among people who run semi-regularly, up to marathon runners. And then with people who have run a marathon, only a quarter haven't heard of it. And you've got 6 times higher percentage of that group saying they know a lot about it. So it's really increasing that awareness. If we look at what it does for attributes, are those positive factors around marathons converting onto those brands? Yes, this isn't just TCS. This is the average across a range of sponsors that we looked at. But those sponsor brands are much more likely to be seen as environmentally, socially, or sustainable or well governed. But they also see very functional attributes improved. They're more likely to be seen as great value for money and as having great customer service by their association with these, I guess, very community engaged mass participation events. And then ultimately, is that changing behaviors? Well, if we look at, if we ask this audience about their consideration to use these different brands, it doesn't change the dial much for things like Nike and New Balance. They're already pretty much ubiquitous, saturated in the market. Most people in that category are likely to consider them. But even for consumer brands, mixed brands such as the banks, or B2B brands such as TCS or Schneider Electric, you can see that in the red, you've got non-runners, much higher levels of consideration among runners, and then even higher again among those people who've run a marathon. So these brands engaging with it are changing decision-making among relevant audiences. Quick one on what marathon runners say is important. This looks like, oh, these are the ones to go for. Easy to enter, easy to get to, great weather and temperature. But actually, when ranking these sort of 14 attributes in terms of importance, the key story to be taken away from this is that actually there aren't some key attributes that stand out. Marathon runners are a whole range of people, some of which have never run a marathon before. Maybe this is the most important categories to attract them to a race, so easy to enter and easy to get to, so low barrier to entry. But you've got still 15% of people saying it. One of the top 3 factors is its classification. Is it, major, elite label, gold label races? So actually, we can't, from this, give you 1 or 2 key insights, but you need to go a little bit deeper, as these runners aren't the kind of hive mind, as I said at the event, when you see them running around the park, sort of 50 strong in a running club. But it's a range of different drivers of their decision making that we see. And again, we tried to pull that out with the statistical analysis to say, okay, but people are choosing London, they're choosing New York. What makes them do that? But in the end, we saw a super low correlation, and actually said you've got to basically wipe that out. This isn't one group, and you have to do a bit of a deeper analysis. And lastly, just before we get to the economic impact, a little bit of how do marathons interact with the cities they're in. Brand Finance also put out a report on the top cities. This isn't just who's got the best tourism industry, but actually is about attracting students, attracting talent into the workforce, attracting foreign investment. And so it's all about creating a long-term, strong, sustainable city. If we look at our top 20 cities here, you've got London, New York, Paris, Tokyo. So a load of those that are coming up in our top marathon ranking. So people are influenced by the factors that make a great city in our city index, but it's not just I want to go there and then go to the museums or the natural wonders, the national parks, but it's all the factors that were driving marathon decision making around things like safety, infrastructure as well, affordability. And so if we compare those two things, we've got the marathon brand ranking along the top. So the further right you are, the stronger the marathon brand, and the further up you are, the stronger the city brand. We can see 1, 2, 3. We've got London, New York, Paris. And a very strong trend, but some of the outliers we see here are Singapore, an amazingly strong city brand, but actually its marathon isn't as comparably loved as some of those that we see up here, and those that are perhaps slightly weaker city brands or not right up in that top echelon. Boston, Dublin, Rio have really attractive marathons, and so we can look into why that is. What is it about those places that's allowed them to build a really attractive, positive event? And what are some of perhaps the cultural differences that mean that people are really keen to run those? And then some of the strongest marathons that sit outside of our city brand rank, we can see Kobe, Ottawa, Gold Coast. Perhaps they're attracting people for different reasons, whether it's things like nature, things like the environment you'll be running in. That means that actually the fact that they're not a massive city means that they're strong. So there's a lot of insight to be brought from here, but I've probably gone over time anyway. So looking quickly at the economic impact, what we're trying to do here is determine what are these doing for the city in terms of the spend of those running the marathon, those visiting, and generally boosting that local economy. And the reason one might look into this is to convince your city to do it again, to close those roads. But also, I think, just to celebrate the fact that these mass participation events are completely different to things like professional sports and music festivals, because they sit in that middle category where the average person can run with those professional runners, and you've got up to almost 60,000 people running on the day now, but also over 1 million attending and spectating and spending around those events. So this is a bit of a whistle through on calculating the economic impact, a big simplification, but what we need to do is understand two different groups. So we've got the runners and the spectators as the key groups who are increasing spend in this area. Within each of those, you've got local and international. Locals are more likely to just spend on things like food, local transportation, whereas international runners and spectators will be spending on international travel, hotels. Maybe they'll also go to other entertainment and spend in other categories during their stay. And so you've got things like their direct spend, which is those things I've just mentioned, so food, transport, entertainment, as well as indirect spend. The things that change in here, a lot of different assumptions we had to make. So what is the different spend per day? How many nights staying? How many international fans? So what's the makeup of local and international runners, local and international spectators for each of these races? And that gives us the direct spend. And then from that, we have to apply a indirect spending multiplier. So that's obviously these guys have bought their beer, they've bought their hot dog, and then this is what does that money then go on to enable people to do? So that's the hot dog seller, buying a t-shirt, going on and buying something, and sort of multiplying that spend as that money's been put into that market. We then add on things like the charity funds, the organizer turnover, so the not just the money that comes in, but how it's spent to give back to the city. So there's the entry fees, but those become spend on things like security, things like the products and services that they have to buy to enable that race to take place. And then we get to our total economic impact. So this is a simplification that's already very, very complicated, but this is the process that's run for every single one of those top 50 marathons. What we end up is this economic impact ranking. And we see, yes, some of the top names that we remember in there, but actually a bit of a surprise. Chicago Marathon coming out as the highest economic impact, followed by New York, Berlin with the bronze medal, and then London, Boston, Paris, Rome, Tokyo, LA, San Francisco. So members of in and around that top 10 strongest marathons sitting there, but some of these sort of quite exceptional in their high numbers. What influences that? Well, if we look at these with the bubble size being the economic impact on a chart, we can see estimated spectators is a massive influence of driving more economic impact. And then the number of international runners is, again, a really, really strong influence. So Berlin Marathon with around 65% of the runners being international. I think that has broken my visa. If you can still hear me, that is actually the last one anyway. But I think the last line I had was that in total we saw 5.2 billion in economic impact to those 50 cities with a top marathon brand, which is just a huge number and is hopefully encouraging to those of you who are involved in organising and stakeholders in those events.
Thanks, Hugo. Some amazing data there, and I know it's been circulated already for a couple of weeks, and it's created a huge amount of interest on LinkedIn and other platforms. So we'll certainly share the report with the people that have registered. I got one question. There's been a number of comments in the chat, people raving about the data and so on, but there's one question there that I just wanted to quickly read. We are tight on time, but just quickly to wrap it up. What are the potential biases in the data collection calculation? Is it possible that it's biased towards markets with higher tech adoption? I ask this specifically because the San Francisco Marathon, while a great race, seems to have substantially outkicked its coverage with the company it's keeping in these rankings. 2, is the intent for this to become an annual or at least regular quadrennial, etc. report? And that's from Ali Ash.
Yeah, I think definitely don't see this as, this is the definitive ranking. I need these questions coming in because they allow us to look into the nuance. So one of them we said, actually that's a lot higher than a very keen plugged in running audience would say, was San Francisco and perhaps Madrid, much smaller marathons than 2 that scored lower in our strength ranking, Chicago, one of the world marathon majors, and Valencia. And what we have there is, I guess the bias would be trying to set what is the balance of importance of different audience groups that we measured. Yes, we could measure only people who've ran 5 marathons and say these are the best marathons, but that wouldn't be true because of the 1 million people who are out on the street for London Marathon and the people who donated to give it its, massive charitable fundraising figures. They're not, a keen marathon understanding audience, and so we have to balance that there are different groups in these categories who are all engaging with the topic. And so we did this. We can set up the ranking and an analysis of what about just the hyper engaged audience? What do they think is top? And you see some of those things bubble up. But with the amount of money raised through charity, the amount of an importance of international audiences, actually you see names like Madrid, names like San Francisco are attractive because people know the cities. They think they're, safe. They have thoughts around them. And this should not be me shooting people down and saying you can't change this. This is what is being communicated about Chicago, not necessarily the marathon, but the city and things like that, that is either reaching people or not reaching people. And what's being communicated about San Francisco? What can these cities latch onto or change perceptions of, or seize as strengths that will allow them to actually get their maximum potential from this? So I shouldn't be seen as hopefully not shooting people down. I want the questions to come in to say, why doesn't this match up with my reality? And then is this going to be an annual study? We definitely want to do it again. We'll have to have a think about whether the data will change enough year to year for it to be worth looking into that. Obviously, if marathons keep gaining interest at the speed they are. Perhaps the annual is most important, but it depends on whether whether I get to about 6 months time and think, oh my God, the technology's changed, the number of people running, the interest has developed to do that. But we'd definitely love to do it again.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Hugo. Appreciate you sharing it and all your time. And as I said, we'll share it with those that are here.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry if I've overrun a little.
Thanks so much. No worries. All right, which brings us to our last segment today as we say goodbye to Hugo. How do we evolve the business model and what is the impact of the current global environment? Delighted to welcome Charlotte Melchert, the CEO of World Sports Group. Hello, Charlotte. I'll wait for you to turn your camera on and come and join us. Also delighted to be joined by Trinh, co-founder of Sunrise Events Vietnam. Daniel Krutman, the CEO of Ticket Sports, joining us from Brazil. And Mike Coleman, CEO of TimingHQ, joining us from San Diego. Waiting for everyone to come on. Hello, Daniel, can see you there. Hello there, Mike.
Hey, Chris, I'm just waiting for my camera to be unlocked.
Hey, can you turn Bang's camera on there, please, Mikey?
I think mine is blocked as well, Chris.
Okay, you should be able to. It's requesting you to unblock it, but there you go, Bang. We can see you. And Charlotte, thank you for waiting. I'm conscious that we are running a little bit over time. And Mike, I know that you probably have to duck off, so please do that when you have to. And I think, Bang, you may have an appointment as well. But let's get underway. I just wanted to take a couple of moments to set the scene a little bit. We've heard so much about sellout events, very topical this week. 1.1 million people in the ballot for London Marathon, up from 830,000 last year. Captured the attention of BBC, big article on it or show on it recently about has the UK become a running city. We're seeing this huge growth at the top of the pyramid in many, many markets. But there's other parts of the world where we're seeing some different data, and some from emerging markets, some from even more established markets, and hearing things. So, for example, we'll hear from Daniel, done an analysis, 7,200 organizers in Brazil for 8,500 events, and the belief that only 15% of them are making real profits. In Sweden, 15 to 20% of organizers have not returned since COVID. In Australia, that figure is at 30% apparently. I was talking to the organizers of the Singapore Marathon today, Ironman, and they tell me that they believe there are only 30% of the number of events in Singapore now that there were pre-COVID. And then some other anecdotal data, talking to Sue Tin from MyLapse from an Asian perspective, saying that the top quality is absolutely selling out faster, but runners are only prepared to pay for quality. And then there's this no in-betweens. There's this huge gap to next tier of fun runners and participants that are really cheap. So one of the questions I posed is this just market rationalization, or are there some underlying challenges in the business model in terms of revenue streams which are fundamentally limited to entry fees and sponsorships, and that varies in different markets, and we'll hear an Asian perspective on that in terms of the relative roles of entry fees and sponsorship. In some areas, government grants, and then these real significant variations across the globe, with no mistaking that there is this undeniable global running boom that's happening, but interested to see how that trickles down and what it might be telling us about the business model. So really encourage this to potentially be interactive. If you've got some questions, pop them in the chat. I'll try and follow that while I'm having the conversations. But maybe start by throwing to, I think, from the biggest global perspective on the panel. Charlotte, I'd love to get your take on what you're seeing from an Nahutu World's Marathons perspective, just broadly to set the scene in 1.5 minutes or so, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris, and thanks for a fantastic webinar so far. So what we can see from a global perspective is that organizers from all sizes of the events are starting to realize the huge impact of having international participation, and a bit going back to the brand report that we saw, that internationals are bringing so much benefits to an event, and they can also help smaller events to thrive. So they're becoming a very important component. At the same time, we see that small to mid-sized events are struggling because they're small teams, and with these bigger events getting more and more funding, more and more let's say awareness in media, the smaller organizations it's difficult to keep up, and they might not have the skills in the team, they might not have the funding to do huge marketing campaigns, and so it is difficult for them to reach out. And something I think that bigger events can help a lot is to create that connection with the local governments, the tourism bodies, because they have the team, they have the skills, they have the funding to create those kind of contacts, and that will benefit the whole region with also smaller events. So the bigger events can play a much bigger role in also helping the long tail of events.
Thank you, Charlotte. Let's come to you, Bang, from a bit of an Asian perspective. And Sunrise Events Vietnam has, I guess, experience across marathons. You put on 2 big marathons in Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi, and then a couple of Ironman events as well. And the business model, I think, somewhat different in Asia. And I'd love to get your take on, this balance of lower entry fee tolerance here and sponsorship, and how you see that in Vietnam and your other exposure in Asia through Sunrise Events.
Sure, thanks, Chris. Sorry. Just big disclaimer, obviously context matters. From Asia, and especially in Vietnam, in the Vietnam context, it's a much earlier market than many of the more developed markets out there. So a lot of it is a function of market maturity. Where is your audience? Where are your stakeholders, from government partners to athletes? Again, setting the stage, maybe 2017, there were probably only 6 marathon events in the country when we first brought our big marathon that had 4,500 people across multiple distances in the first year. Now we're close to 20,000 this year. A lot of it had to be starting a whole movement. And we heard this from India and what they're doing with kids. Is the same thing had to happen in Vietnam. And what we benefit from in Vietnam and in Asia, I think, compared to the other markets, is there are global playbooks. There's a lot of benchmarking. I try to do that all the time. I look at some of the, again, this brand finance report is great to say several $100 million of economic impact for these super developed marathons. I said that's a wonderful target state. What we're always trying to figure out is where are we in the interim state? Where are we relative to others? So trying to benchmark that and understand how others are going through that journey helps inform us. But there's the reality is there's probably no silver, no shortcuts, no silver bullet. It is really going back to first principles. How does the business work? How does it evolve? What is our right to win? And so again, I'd say just in 3 quick words would be trying to localize global playbooks that have worked, really drawing across as many cross-sector experiences as possible. At one of the MPW conferences you held, we talked about the hospitality industry and what works there, and how does that apply in the context of mass participation sports. I've also had the benefit of being in the banking industry and the entertainment industry, so thinking about customer segments, experiences, and then frankly, one of the earlier conversations was around being very patient capital. I spent a lot of time post-COVID talking to my team about operational resiliency versus just pure efficiency, especially in this global context with trade wars and disrupted supply chains. These are all things that really come back to fundamentals of, do you really understand how your business works? Do you understand your customers? Do you understand the drivers of your business? And all the while, I think the 2 things that I always think about is, number 1, don't die. So you mentioned all these statistics about people falling off the radar. And then number 2, try to be top, whether it's top decile or top quartile, it gives you room to kind of, outmaneuver or maybe a little bit more scale, whatever the case may be, so that you can continue to evolve and adapt as the environment throws a lot of curveballs at you. So that's kind of the thinking that we go through here in Vietnam and probably in Asia, where we do get to benefit from the experience of more developed markets.
Thanks, Bang. And I'll come back to you in a little while to hear of your specific case study with your Da Nang Ironman. But you said make sure you don't die. And Daniel, you've got some pretty amazing statistics in Brazil of the number of new startups that are coming into the industry and how long they last and how quickly they're disappearing. Give us some sense of that in that exploding market in Brazil, from what I understand.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Bang. Is about consistency, and what we see is that this boom of the running of the races are bringing up a lot of companies that are like endeavoring in our market, and they are arriving thinking like we are the new treasure of maybe a blue ocean. And when they arrive, they see that the entry barriers are not that big, but the keep and survive barriers, they are really big. So what we see here is a death rate that achieves 40% of the market if we take like 10 years behind us. So 40% of the companies that existed 10 years ago doesn't exist anymore. So this is a big number. And another thing that shows us that it's difficult to make business in this segment is that we have now 1,000 event organizers as clients here in the platform, and the top one organizer makes the same as the bottom 500 as money-wise speaking. So the top one makes the same as the 500 bottom less profitable or revenue events in terms of registration. So
the bottom 500 combined, their revenues equal the same as the top organizer.
That's the top one. Yeah, in the middle of 1,000 clients. So that's what we're facing. And those 500, a lot of them cannot strive. They end by dying somehow.
Yeah. Okay. Fascinating. Thank you. Let's come over to you, Mike. So you kind of have a foot in two camps. You do obviously a lot of work across America, and you also do work in Mexico, emerging market. When we spoke this morning, you were speaking about a lot of your clients making decent money. And across the US, the same thing. We spoke at the start of massive sellouts of some of the bigger events, but you also shared that some of the smaller events are struggling. And part of what you put that down to was the old bit of a cookie cutter approach. They're just regurgitating what they've done for years. And it's those that are being, so in terms of evolving the business model, those are being smarter with their marketing, working better with partners and so on. Talk us through a little bit about that, please.
Yeah. So I have a network of, events that, go across the country, and different partners and stuff like that. So in preparing for kind of this presentation or chat, I reached out to a couple of the different race directors and owners across the country, and it's fascinating because we manage events and we also time a lot of events, like you said, across Mexico and the US, where we are operating in sizable events. So probably our minimum size is around 1,000, 1,500 participants, where we are seeing all of our events growing across Mexico, across the US as well. But hearing data and hearing like rumblings, especially from some of the data over the last couple of weeks, I got out and was talking to a lot of different organizers that do a lot of different events. So probably of the 3 different organizations that I talked to, they represent another 300-400 events on top of mine, but they also do smaller events. So smaller charity events, very local events, and they are definitely seeing those smaller fundraising type community events like dropping in 20-30%, where we're seeing increases in 15-20% year over year for the last couple of years. And we started talking and chatting about it. It's really those events that are around that 500, under 500 participant mark. And so one of the things that was called out was that, the savviness of marketing, the small charity organizations are basically, posting on Facebook and Instagram and saying, hey, our registration's open, come join our race, kind of thing. Price is going up, in a couple of weeks, just these simple messages, but not really engaging and not using the tools to the best of their ability, where you're seeing larger organizations have somebody dedicated, to marketing and creating stories and getting out and involving, we're in the US right now, we're having a huge running boom in like running clubs, and running clubs are just exploding everywhere. I mean, from different bars having them to different, gyms having them. It's just, all the shoe stores, it's crazy how it's booming everywhere. And so are those organizations or those events engaging those running clubs as well, and then or getting ambassadors to be out and speaking about your event to other organizations outside of just your local running group or your event per se. So it's kind of like I think marketing is key. It doesn't have to be paid marketing. I think it has to be really using your audience and engagement and your data of what you have from past events. And I just don't think I think people are just getting stagnant in how they're marketing, and it's just like if it's not working, you need to fix it, right? And I don't think a lot of those smaller organizations are doing that.
Thanks, Mike. Charlotte, let's come back to you, because a couple of the things that Mike's touched on, you touched on in the notes that you sent through as well. So, one of the things you spoke about is small and mid-sized businesses being able to differentiate themselves, content being king around that, and also the point, and it's multi-points within there, but the running clubs and the innovation, which you touched on, the Friday night lights and so on. So just a couple of minutes to chat about those key points there.
Yeah, and as Mike said, having that kind of marketing in-house is super tricky for a small team. So you have to team up with others, and running clubs, as you mentioned, they are the perfect partner to start to bring awareness to your events. And it's difficult, but you have to start to think about your event as a storytelling opportunity. How do you create those shareable moments, especially with younger generations? And what is really nice with having this super fragmented industry, where you can find all types of events, the bigger ones, the smaller ones, the niche ones, the urban ones, is that the audience actually appreciates that. And now when events start to be a little bit more like your identity, you might, as a running group or as an individual or friends, you might want to seek that quite unusual experience, the event that no one has heard of, go to a place that no one has visited in your group of friends. So you want to be a bit unique. So there's definitely a place for these mid to small size events, and they have a really important role to fill in the industry. But they do need help with tools and innovation, and also, as Mike said, it doesn't have to be paid channels, but you have to put a lot of effort into maybe be creative and partner up with others and get your message out there.
Do you have any examples of people that have done that well? Because it is one of the things, and one of the things I was talking to Mike about earlier this morning is, again, coming back to the theme of evolving the business model, this outsource versus in-house, building high overheads, which some organizations have struggled with, and his business is outsourced from operations and timing and permitting and so on. But where have you seen some good examples that the audience might be able to pick up on of creating that good content with people that don't necessarily have the in-house resources?
So examples from all over the world is when, and especially Southeast Asia, where you team up with local businesses and you create some really nice experiences around the event. So it's not only the event, it's what's happening before, it's what's happening after. And also we have some events that are excellent in teaming up with tourism organizations like Dubrovnik Marathon. They've done that for years, but they're so closely bonded to the city and the tourism for the whole year, because it's not only about the event, it's about the brand of the city. So yeah, there's lots of things that can be done, but usually it requires someone in the event organization to start to reach out and build long-term relationships with their community, with local businesses, and also the local tourism agencies.
So that's a great
and then
segue.
They can also get funding.
Carry on.
And something we have seen also is that smaller events can also get funding from either state initiatives or regional initiatives. So now there's a big campaign ongoing in Thailand, for example, when they try to shift the focus to sport tourism. So 2025 is a year of sports. So then they have funding also to pour into the events. So yeah, it's important to keep track of those and also try to inspire region cities to have that kind of themes and investments.
Thanks, Charlotte. Let's take that as a segue to come back to you, Bang, in terms of those long-term partnerships and the example of your challenge that you faced with losing your title sponsor in Da Nang, and the fact that you'd built this great partnership with one of your existing partners to find a replacement. Tell us a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, look, I think this is again about resiliency and adaptability. We were celebrating 10 years of Ironman in Vietnam this year. And what I learned very early on is that your sponsors or your partners can't always stay the course, like the Standard Chartered Marathon in Singapore, Hong Kong, and such. And I think from early on, we realized that even though sponsorship and certainly our title sponsor is a huge part of making the event work financially, we've worked to a point where we think about a multi-year type framework of around sponsors coming and going ideally, but if you lose one, how do you go to your backup, smaller sponsors and partners you've had for many years? So I think we've cultivated a lot of partners, a partner roster, deep bench, and in this case, we did lose a very important partner we've had for a couple of years, and it took a little while, but ultimately, as it came closer to the drop dead date, of which, as many organizers know, when you're starting to do participant production and there's either a brand partner on there or not, you lose a lot of value. And so we were able to go to a partner who we had worked with for many years, which was a much smaller partner, and kind of made it work, right? It was understanding what their constraints were around their budget. It was understanding what we need, what we could potentially help them brand and get value out of without costing a ton of money for us on the delivery and production side. And ultimately, we're able to bring a partner on board that, one, fortunately, the partner and the founder or the CEO of the company was already engaged in the sport. That always helps. And that was over many years. And then two, just creating a real win-win where they got benefits without having to cough up what would be typical, and we just had to get back down to basics. And this is why one of the pillars of our business is cost excellence or data excellence, really understanding the numbers to make things work, and able to bring that partnership together. And that's, I think, when I think about the values or core values of how we drive our business in Vietnam, it's around this word impact. The I is for integrity, M is for mastery, P is for professionalism, A is for adaptability, C, customer focus and teamwork. It's that adaptability, it's the professionalism, it's all of these things that come together that I think our partners have recognized. It's also understanding that sponsors are much more partners and customers as well, not just sponsors. And taking that type of mindset and approach, I think, has helped us really kind of ride through this evolving wave of changes in the industry, shifts in business cycles and as such. And then ideally, being able to do this, we'll be able to carry this forward in the future and have them be somewhere participating and connecting with us along this longer journey of building a great city asset.
Thanks, Bang. You have another acronym, ICAP, which you used in that process, which you've shared with me a number of times.
Sure. I think this is,
I think it's very powerful.
for all of us here, we're always engaged with multiple stakeholders. And it's a bit of a negotiation in life and making partnerships work. So ICAP, and I borrowed this from a Harvard Business School professor who came and taught us in a great seminar. But everything we're doing, especially around health, kids, sports, active lifestyle, I think there's a very much a shared interest in this. I think the other three parts of it, the C, the A, the P, are equally important, which is the constraints. What are the constraints that we face as organizers or stakeholders? What are the constraints other partners may have? What are the alternatives that each one of us have? And then ultimately, it's the perspective. And I think getting deep into that and understanding where someone is coming from, how do you meet them where they are versus where you'd like them to be? It's an iterative conversation that I tend to have with all my stakeholders, but around, again, a common vision to start off with, and then truly understanding, what are the issues that you have? What are the constraints? What would be your alternatives? And then what are your perspectives? I found that as a very useful framework in helping me evolve my conversation, especially when there's multiple stakeholders, because then you have to look at it this across multiple dimensions, whether it's a government partner, a branding partner, and then your broader community of participants and kind of non-participants like spectators. So that's the ICAP framework that I've used. I continue to apply that. I try to get my team, try to get everybody on board there, because it's kind of a very easy way to engage without being emotional about it. And I think it's certainly helped us with respect to the conversations we have with our stakeholders.
Thanks, Bang. Really powerful. Thank you. Daniel, let's come back to you and just get a sense. Brazil, we spoke a little bit of the challenges there, the negativity in terms of businesses disappearing and the challenges. What's some of the upside? What are you looking at over the next year? Are there businesses becoming more sustainable? And if so, what do you see? Are there new revenue streams? Is there new creative ways of doing it? Are there new concepts that are helping to build more sustainable businesses in Brazil and Latin America?
Sure, Chris. Nothing is bad news. I mean, we are a growing market. We are feeling that we are growing 26% in this year on organic side. And this is very good. This embraces all the businesses from the top of the tail to the back of the tail. And it's not that those events that are emerging are dying instantly. They need consistency. They need to be resilient, as we are speaking right now, and they are having a good chance to strive. So we are seeing, we are foresighting at minimum 5 years of growth in here in a row. And in my side, I think that will be 100 years of growth in our market. So this is spreading, the word is spreading, and the organizers are more confident on investing on their businesses, on attracting more talents, for example, which is a huge challenge for our market, in my way of thinking it, because we are not as sexy as other sports market until now, but I think we are changing that with big events happening. Maratona do Rio, which is Rio's marathon, is now announcing they will be the biggest one in ever, with 60,000 people running now in June in Rio. So it will be the biggest running festival in Brazil. And São Silvestre, which is also the other big event, to be 50,000 people running as well this year. They already announced it. So things are selling out. And what we see is that those big organizers are really going well and consolidating their brands. What I like the most in the Hugo's last talk, which was great, by the way, is how they put brand as a big thing. It's not just about the revenue that the event is making right now. It's also about how they are bringing the brand up to support all the times we face. I mean, it could be another pandemic, it could be another thing, and the brand sustain it all. So that's the message we're trying to pass around here, that the companies can be like really profitable if they work well, and the market is growing. Of course, there is the thing about these companies emerging and all of these charity things and all of these little entrepreneurs trying to get into our segment. But also there is this natural growth of 26% on the number of registrations, which supports it all and makes a very optimistic scenario for the market. We're going to grow for the next 5 years. For me, we're going to grow for the next 100 years.
Wonderful. Wonderfully positive way to finish off there in Brazil. Let's come back to you, Mike, just to wrap it up, because we are pretty much out of time. But one of the things you were talking about this morning, which ties into our very start today with the McKinsey WFGSI report, is that you see in Mexico, governments getting involved in events and supporting events and funding them to build healthier communities. Just talk us through that one a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, and then we'll call it a wrap after that, because we're already a fair bit over time.
Yeah, most of the events we're involved with are actually subsidized by the city. So like Tijuana, Ensenada, Rosarito, Monterey, like a lot of them have the city engagement. I mean, the entry point and price, somewhat to like Vietnam and Bang's area, is that, you know, it's the ticket price is very cheap, and it's subsidized by the city and the local governments to have the events. And there is an initiative, especially in our region of where we operate in Mexico, to have a healthier, you know, community, and to get running, you know, get people out running. And it's just we're seeing growth where, to the point where we're selling out events, you know, quickly. And it's like, can we get more funding, you know, from the cities to help us grow the event? Because I mean, the courses that we're operating on can, you know, have, you know, more participants. But with that said, you know, it's, you know, what's the funding we can get from the government? So a lot of the events are selling out. And then we look for next year of, you know, growing those events and stuff like that. But yeah, the cities or the local states and governments involvement has increased. And, you know, we don't have that so much in the US side. We do get, you know, discounts and stuff for permitting and everything for our larger events with cities, but not to the extent of getting, you know, government funding like we do down in Mexico.
Wonderful, and I think, you know, it is an opportunity that's often missed in the industry, and it's not easy. But you know, we talk about races and the participation running side, but we often don't tell the narrative around the health and well-being impacts. And I think there's need for more data around that. There's increasing amounts coming through, and I think there is government funding. Charlotte touched on that as well. Even for smaller events, there's government funding if you're able to look for it. So
To add to that real quick, we have like, you know, I talked over with the conferences, you know, we have this event that we cross the border, you know, from San Diego to Tijuana, and we have the Tijuana government, you know, involved, and the city of San Diego involved as well. So it's a great opportunity to not only, you know, there's the tourist side of it, and the uniqueness of it, but it's bringing two countries actually together as well, but in funding as well as, you know, community aspect. So it's kind of cool to see, to your point of just like everybody wants to see more runners right now.
Yeah. So. Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Charlotte. We could talk for an hour on this subject. Thank you, Daniel. And Bang, I think, has had to drop off to go to another meeting. But thanks so much for those insights, and look forward to seeing you all again sometime soon.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Are you all still there, Bang?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for the insights. Folks, thank you. That's pretty much a wrap. I really appreciate we did run over on a couple of those segments, but judging by the comments in the chat, there was some really valuable insights that came there. So thank you for staying the distance, those of you. I think we still see there's 80 odd people online. We had nearly 400 registered. We are live streaming on the MPW Facebook page. We are recording as well. We will send out that recording and the decks. A note for your diary is the 3rd of July, which is the next webinar. We'll send you details on that shortly, but put that in your diary now and look forward to seeing you then. Thanks again to all of our speakers. Thank you, Alessio and Natasha, for the opportunity again for World Athletics. Good night, good morning, good day, wherever you're from joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. I'm Chris Robb, CEO and founder of MPW. Delighted to have been your host for the last 2 and now nearly 3/4 hours. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.